Chapter 10:23. The Imperial Protector immediately rejoiced when he heard Luo Duo's words. He hurriedly clasped his hands and said, "Luo Duo, Imperial Protector! Since the Bloodsword sect has nothing to fear, we might as well go all the way. We'll directly uproot the Bloodsword sect and take revenge for the 1,000-year enmity." A cold light immediately flickered through Luo Duo's eyes. He lowered his head in thought and said, "Right now, the sect master of the Bloodsword sect, Houston, is still alive. We can't force them into a dead end, or we'll probably be met with a full-force counterattack from Houston. If a great perfection, Holy Emperor, decides to throw away his life to take revenge on us, it'll be a devastating disaster for our Felicity Empire. However, it's still possible to kill the saint rulers of the Bloodsword sect that have invaded the kingdom of Longqi." Luo Duo's presence suddenly changed. He suddenly turned around and stared at the respectful Imperial Protector of the kingdom of Longqi with shining eyes. He said, "Immediately return to the kingdom of Longqi and closely monitor the movements of the experts of the Bloodsword sect. Just in case, I need to see the other Imperial Protector in the Imperial Palace before I deal with the Bloodsword sect." "Yes, sir." The Imperial Protector of the kingdom of Longqi immediately returned through a space gate in the Imperial Palace. Luo Duo did not stop at all. He immediately made his way to the forbidden grounds of the Imperial Palace. A heavy killing intent flickered through his eyes from time to time. "Brother, you died to the hands of the experts of the Bloodsword sect over 1,000 years ago. I didn't have the power to take revenge for you back then, but the opportunity has come. I can guarantee you that once the sect master of the Bloodsword sect, Houston, dies, I'll immediately use the power of the Felicity Empire to uproot the Bloodsword sect and take revenge for you." Back then, when Lodo broke through to the Holy Emperor realm, he could have stayed in the Longqi kingdom and increased the status of the Longqi kingdom. However, he didn't hesitate and came to the Felicity Empire to become the Imperial Protector. The main reason was because of the Bloodsword sect. He had always wanted to use the power of the Felicity Empire to eliminate the Bloodsword sect. In the imperial city of the Longqi kingdom, the Imperial Protector who had returned from Felicity brought back Luo Duo's orders. As a result, the four of them did not continue to make trouble for the four protectors of the Bloodsword sect. Instead, they stayed in the Imperial Palace and carefully sensed the auras of the four protectors, paying attention to their movements at all times. However, the four of them did notice that two uninvited guests had appeared in the Longqi Kingdom's Imperial Palace. They were quietly hiding in a remote area. 2 days passed in the blink of an eye. These 2 days were very peaceful. The imperial city of the Longqi Kingdom was still operating as usual. The bustling streets were bustling with people coming and going all day long. It was a hubbub of voices. It was very lively. At this moment, several sounds of breaking through the air suddenly rang out. Several silhouettes were rapidly approaching the imperial city of the Longqi Kingdom. Their speed was extremely fast. A moment ago, they were still far away in the horizon, but in the next second, they were already floating in the air above the imperial city. There in the city, an extremely handsome young man who seemed to be in his 20s stood at the very front of the group. He held a blood-red token in his hand as he indifferently spoke. His eyes were as sharp as unsheathed swords as he slowly scanned the city below him. These people were Jianqin, Ruijin, Blackfish, and Honglian. After a few days of traveling, the four of them had basically traversed half of the Tianyuan continent. They had followed the directions of the token to find this place. Although they had all traveled through the air, the other three had all reached the great perfection of the Holy Emperor aside from Jianqin. Their comprehension of the mysteries of space had reached the apex. With their ability to control space, they were nowhere near as fast as space gates, but they were still unbelievably fast. As a result, Jianqin crossed the distance in an extremely short amount of time with Ruijin leading the way, arriving here from Mercenary City. Just as Jianqin's group arrived above the city, the four protectors of the Bloodsword sect opened their eyes at the same time. One of them said with a deep voice, "I can sense the presence of the token. The new sect master has arrived. The three of you come with me to receive him." For red blurs flashed by, and the four protectors all flew out of the window. They appeared in the sky like ghosts and just happened to stand before Genshin. The four of them first looked at the token in Genshin's hand before slowly shifting their gazes to Genshin. When they saw Genshin's appearance, they became stunned. Even their eyes became rather stunned. Disbelief flooded their faces. The four of them had never thought that the new sect master would not be one of the founding members of the sect, but the young Genshin. Genshin remained the same as before. He glanced past the four protectors before clasping his hands at them. "I am Genshin. Greetings, protectors." Genshin still felt gratitude towards the four protectors of the Blood Sword sect. He would never forget that when Changyang Prefecture was in trouble a few years ago, it was because of the timely arrival of the four protectors that prevented Changyang Prefecture from suffering too much damage. Otherwise, the entire Changyang Prefecture would have been razed to the ground by Old Man Situ and the others. At that time, the people who would be injured would not be limited to just Changyang Ba and Bai Yuntian. The four protectors returned to their senses very quickly. Seeing how the new sect master was actually so courteous to them, they immediately felt flattered. Without any hesitation, the four of them dropped to one knee in the air and called out, "The four protectors of the Blood Sword sect greet the sect master." What sect master? Genshin became stunned when he heard how the four protectors had addressed him, but he understood very quickly. There was probably a rule in the Blood Sword sect where seeing the token was the same as seeing the sect master. Since he was holding the token of the sect, the four protectors naturally mistook him as the sect master. Please don't misunderstand, protectors. I, Genshin, am not the sect master of the Blood Sword sect. Uncle Xiao only lent me this token so that I could use it to find the four of you. Genshin hurriedly explained, but he muttered inside, "So Houston is Uncle Xiao's real name." The reason why his surname changed is probably because he retreated to the continent 1,000 years ago. After all, what happened 1,000 years ago was just too great of a blow to Uncle Xiao. The four protectors of the Blood Sword sect still did not stand up. One of them lowered his head and said, "Sect Master, the old sect master used a secret technique to notify us a few days ago. He told us that he had already passed on his position. In the future, the person who comes to us with the command arrow will be the new sect master of the Blood Sword sect. Everyone in the Blood Sword sect must obey the new sect master." What did you say? Uncle Xiao has already passed on the position of sect master? This time, it was Genshin's turn to be surprised. No matter how muddle-headed Genshin was, he understood that Uncle Xiao had already passed on the position of sect master to him since the four protectors had spoken so clearly. However, the news had come just too suddenly, so Genshin struggled to accept it. He had never thought that his status would undergo a drastic change the moment he received the token from Uncle Xiao. He had become the sect master of the Blood Sword sect for no reason. The Blood Sword sect was one of the three great assassin organizations renowned across the Tianyuan continent. They could not be underestimated. Although they were nowhere close to the protector clans, they were no weaker than ancient clans. The four protectors have been ordered by the old sect master to await the sect master's arrival. At the same time, we're to keep an eye on the two human traders. We await the sect master's instructions on what we should do next. The four protectors said together as if they could read each other's minds. Genshin sank into his thoughts. Now that the people who had killed his parents were here, he was in no mood to dwell on the matter of the sect master. He immediately put it aside for now and said, "May I ask where the two human traders are right now? Have you not killed them after chasing them for so many years?" "Sect master, the two of them are in the Imperial Palace. Due to the old sect master's orders a few years ago, we did not kill or capture the two traitors. As a result, the two of them are still alive, said a protector. I see. Jianchen came to a realization. He then looked at the majestic imperial palace in the distance and said, Let's go. Let's go to the imperial palace. With that, Jianchen flew toward the imperial palace first. Ruijin, Heiyu, and Heiyu followed closely behind Jianchen. The four protectors walked side by side at the back. The group arrived outside the imperial palace of the Longqi kingdom very quickly. Afterwards, they swaggered into the palace from above. Only when they arrived at the center of the palace did they stop. They hovered several hundred meters in the air and looked down at the resplendent palaces below. Bloodsword sect, you've gone too far. How dare you step on the heaven's gate of the imperial palace of our Longqi kingdom? Do you really think there's no one in our kingdom? A furious roar rang out from below. Although the voice was old, it was filled with energy. The tremendous voice echoed through the surroundings, scattering the clouds above. With that, ruddy old men flew out from the imperial palace. They charged into the sky with tremendous presences and faced Jianchen's group from 100 meters away. Chapter 1024. The four imperial protectors of the Longqi kingdom faced off against Jianchen's group from 100 meters away. Their expressions were extremely ugly. The people from the Bloodsword sect had already arrived, but the imperial protector of the Luo Duo kingdom, who they relied on the most, still hadn't arrived. This made the four of them feel extremely uneasy. Although four of them have hidden their presences so that we can't sense their strength, they must be saint rulers since they can hover in the air without relying on the energy of the world. There are 8 saint rulers in total, so the four of us are definitely not their opponents, Jianchen said. The four imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom thought to himself. They were outnumbered right now, so they could not act rashly. People of the Bloodsword sect, this is an important place in the imperial palace of the Longqi kingdom. You are not welcome here. Please leave immediately, one of the imperial protectors said emotionlessly with a deep voice. The cold attitude of the imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom made Jianchen frown slightly. He glanced at the four of them, but he did not say anything. He immediately expanded his soul and enveloped the entire imperial palace. Very soon he found the old man Situ and the old man Ma Tun hiding in the palace. Jianchen clasped his fist at the imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom and said, Gentlemen, I have chased after an enemy all the way here. The enemy is currently hiding in the imperial palace, so please make things easy for me. Humph. The enemy you speak of in the Bloodsword sect is probably someone who has paid a large sum of money for you to kill. Bloodsword sect, you are far too arrogant. Although the strength of the Longqi kingdom is far inferior to yours, we are not so easily bullied. Don't even think about killing people in the imperial palace of the Longqi kingdom. The imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom spoke extremely forcefully. They believed that Jianchen wanted to kill an important person in the imperial palace. Hearing this, Jianchen's face sank slightly. If the four of you insist, then we can only offend you. The four imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom shivered, knowing that conflict was unavoidable. Immediately, surging auras were released from their bodies. At the same time, saint weapons appeared in their hands. They were ready for battle. A cold smile appeared on Jianchen's face. Just as he was about to move, a blood-red blur flashed before his eyes. The four protectors of the Bloodsword sect arrived in front of Jianchen at the same time, blocking the four imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom. A blood-red spike appeared in their hands, and a dense layer of baleful qi radiated from their bodies. A great battle was about to break out between the two sides. Ha 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 ha! I didn't think that after hiding for 1,000 years, the Bloodsword sect still hasn't worn down their spirit from back then. They are still as arrogant as ever. At this moment, a loud laughter resounded across the horizon. Soon after, the nearby space began to violently distort. Space was quickly torn apart, forming a space gate. An ordinary-looking, white-haired middle-aged man of about 40 years of age strode out from the space gate. In an instant, he arrived in front of the 4 imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom. At the same time, a vast and boundless aura radiated from the middle-aged man, almost causing the air to freeze. Seeing this middle-aged man, the 4 imperial protector of the Longqi kingdom immediately let out a huge sigh of relief. Their faces revealed excitement. Imperial Protector Luo Duo, you've finally come. If you had come a moment later, the 4 of us probably would have died miserably at the hands of the Bloodsword sect. Luo Duo's face sank when he heard that. He looked at the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect with undisguised killing intent and said coldly, "Your Bloodsword sect really is getting bolder and bolder. You've actually come to my Longqi kingdom time and time again to make trouble. But it's a pity that the current Longqi kingdom is no longer the Longqi kingdom of 1,000 years ago. Since you've come today, there's no need for you to return. Stay here forever." Luo Duo spoke extremely arrogantly. He had already guessed that the sect master of the Bloodsword sect, Houston, was nearing the end of his life. Even if Luo Duo had killed a few experts of the sect, Houston would not dare to take the great risk of offending the Felicity Empire, which would lead to the destruction of the Bloodsword sect. The 4 protectors became stern. From Luo Duo's presence, the 4 of them could tell that he was a holy emperor. They were not people they could deal with as 5th heavenly layer saint rulers. Even with their baleful force, it would be difficult for them to protect themselves. After all, the difference in strength was just too great. Genshin, who stood behind the 4 protectors, began to laugh in anger when he heard Luo Duo's arrogant words. He growled, "If we're talking about arrogance, there's probably no one present who can compare to you. Why don't you weigh yourself before you speak and see if you have the strength to say something like that?" Luo Duo's sharp gaze immediately landed on Genshin. He quickly glanced past Ruijin, Heiyu and Heiyu behind Genshin. However, he was unable to tell their strength, but he did not fear them at all because he had the support of the Felicity Empire. "Kid, who are you? Do you dare to state your name?" Luo Duo asked Genshin with a heavy voice. "How dare you? This is the new sect master of the Bloodsword sect. Do not be rude to him," one of the protectors called out before Genshin could reply. Surprise immediately flashed through Luo Duo's eyes when he heard that Genshin was actually the sect master of the Bloodsword sect. He could not help but carefully study Genshin. He gently smiled. "I never thought that you would actually be the new sect master of the Bloodsword sect. How surprising! May I ask if Senior Houston is doing well? What kind of status do you have with Senior Houston? How can you ask about him? However, since you said that you wanted to keep us here forever, allow me to experience your skills and see if you really have the ability to do so," Luo Duo emotionlessly replied. Afterwards, he passed by the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect and arrived at the very front. He stared at Luo Duo closely. A cold smile appeared on Luo Duo's lips as a strong killing intent flickered in the depths of his eyes. He said in a deep voice, "All right, since the new sect master of the Bloodsword sect wants to experience it, I'll fulfill your wish." With that, Luo Duo reached out, an invisible world force immediately gathered in his hand. Afterward, he slammed it towards Genshin with lightning-like speed. Luo Duo did not hold back at all. Immediately, he pushed out with an overwhelming force. Terrifying pulses of energy caused the surrounding space to violently tremble. Genshin remained composed. He could not be bothered to use his sword against a mere second heavenly layer, holy emperor like Luo Duo. Chaotic force surged out of his Naiden and instantly condensed in his right hand as he threw out a punch. Genshin's punch was simple, but the might it possessed could not be underestimated. The punch tore through the air, causing the space there to crack. A tiny crack appeared. Boom! With a great boom, Genshin's punch dispersed Luo Duo's invisible palm with an unstoppable force. The powerful shock waves shook the surroundings, causing the space within 1,000 meters to violently distort and blur. How is this possible? He actually broke through my palm strike so easily. Luo Duo's heart was filled with shock. The strength of this new sect master of the Blood Sword sect had already far exceeded his expectations. Luo Duo, I'll make you pay for your arrogance now, Jianchen coldly said. He stepped through the air and arrived before Luo Duo in an instant. He also threw out a punch with a boundless presence at Luo Duo's chest. Luo Duo's face suddenly became stern. After witnessing Jianchen's strength, he no longer dared to be careless like before. Extremely powerful saint force surged out from his body, condensing into a palm-sized, fiery red sword in his right hand in an instant. He then stabbed it toward Jianchen's fist with lightning speed. Jianchen sneered. His fist did not change its trajectory and actually struck toward the tip of Luo Duo's sword. He actually wanted to use his body to take on the attack of a second heavenly layer, Holy Emperor's saint weapon. Crazy! The sect master of the Blood Sword sect must be crazy. Does he really think his fist can take on my saint weapon? Humph, since you're so confident, I'll cripple your right arm, Luo Duo sneered inside. The might of his sword actually increased by 30%. Bam! Jianchen's fist collided with Luo Duo's sword and actually produced a muffled sound. A terrifying force erupted from the point of contact and rapidly expanded in all directions. The 4 spectating Imperial Protector and the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect all swayed from the force and were sent flying back uncontrollably. Jianchen's fist was not pierced through as Luo Duo had expected. Instead, it was completely unscathed. Luo Duo's full-powered attack did not even leave a scratch on Jianchen's fist. Jianchen's chaotic body had reached the 3rd layer. Not only did his strength reach the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor's chaotic body, but even his body's defenses had reached the same level. Now he could take on a 3rd heavenly layer Holy Emperor's attack without being injured. Only Holy Emperors at the 3rd heavenly layer and above could pose a threat to him. With Luo Duo's strength at the 2nd heavenly layer, he could not even harm Jianchen unless he used a saint tier battle skill. How is this possible? How is this possible? How can your fist be so tough? Luo Duo stared at Jianchen's unscathed fist in shock. Disbelief filled his face. Jianchen did not say anything. He pressed forward again and threw the same punch at Luo Duo. Dark chaotic force vaguely shot out from his fist. The presence of destruction immediately wreaked havoc in the surroundings, shocking everyone. The power of this punch was much stronger than the previous 2 punches. A gleam of light flashed through Honglian's eyes as she watched from the back. She whispered, "What kind of power is Jianchen using? Why have I never seen or heard of it? Even my inherited memories don't have any records of this power." Ruijin and Blackfish shook their heads at the same time. Ruijin stared at Jianchen without blinking and said, "I don't know either, but I can sense that the power he's using is very powerful. It seems like it's not mature yet. There's still a lot of room for improvement." Sensing the power of Jianchen's punch, Luo Duo's face changed drastically. He immediately blocked with his huge sword. Clang! Jianchen's punch was heavy and powerful. When it struck the saint weapon, it erupted with a shocking sound. The terrifying power actually caused Luo Duo's huge sword to bend slightly. A powerful repulsive force was transmitted from the huge sword, numbing Luo Duo's right arm. Afterwards, his arm went limp. The huge sword that had been blocking in front of him viciously slammed into his chest, breaking several of his ribs. Luo Duo vomited a mouthful of blood as he was immediately blown away. His face paled, having been heavily injured. However, as he flew away, a pure white piece of jade appeared in Luo Duo's hand. He crushed it without any hesitation. Chapter 10:25. After crushing the jade stone in his hand, a relaxed smile appeared on Luo Duo's face. Even though he was heavily injured, he wasn't worried about his life in the slightest. Before returning to the kingdom of Longqi, Luo Duo had thought of all the possibilities and made ample preparations. That was to find the other imperial protector of the Felicity Empire and have them lend a hand at a crucial moment. The jade stone he had just crushed was a method to contact the other imperial protector of the Felicity Empire. Although the kingdom of Longqi was very far from the Felicity Empire, this distance was a piece of cake for any holy emperor. They only needed to casually tear open space and create a space gate to come here. Luo Duo's body flew back several thousand meters before stabilizing. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood. Gentian's punch was comparable to the full power attack of a third heavenly layer, Holy Emperor. Even though Luo Duo only endured a small portion of that punch, he was still heavily injured. Seeing that Luo Duo was heavily injured by Jianqin in just a few moves, the four imperial protector of the kingdom of Longqi couldn't help but change their expressions greatly. Their moods became extremely unsightly. Luo Duo was the greatest reliance of the kingdom of Longqi. He was the pride of the kingdom of Longqi. If even Luo Duo wasn't a match for the other party, then the kingdom of Longqi would no longer have any strength to contend with the Bloodsword sect. Jianqin hovered in the air and coldly looked at Luo Duo. He coldly said, "Sire, if you only have this much strength, then I'm afraid you won't be able to keep the people of the Bloodsword sect here forever." Although Luo Duo was shocked by Jianqin's strength, he still sneered, "Master of the Bloodsword sect, you are indeed very strong. I am far from being your opponent, but the real show is yet to come." As soon as Luo Duo finished speaking, the space in front of him twisted and quickly formed a space gate. Immediately, two powerful presences that were much more powerful than Luo Duo's were emitted from the space gate. They were like two furious dragons that wantonly surged in the surroundings, enveloping the entire space. In front of these two powerful auras, the air stopped flowing, and the yuan qi of the world became still. Even the formless power of the world became quiet. Two white-robed old men walked out from the space gate side by side. Their gazes were like torches as they swept past Jianqin and the others, finally stopping on Luo Duo. However, when they saw Luo Duo's horrible appearance, their expressions changed at the same time. They stepped through the air and immediately arrived before Luo Duo, silently like ghosts. One of them said with a deep voice, "Luo Duo, are you all right? Who injured you like this?" "Imperial Protector Fang Yan, Imperial Protector Taji. The person who injured me is the new master of the Bloodsword sect. I, Luo Duo, am not his opponent. I hope the two Imperial Protectors can help me regain my dignity," Luo Duo said with an extremely deep voice. Imperial Protector Fang Yan patted Luo Duo's shoulder and said, "We're all family, so there's no need to be so polite. Don't worry, we'll get revenge for you." As he said that, the Imperial Protector Fang Yan looked at Jianqin and the others and said, "May I ask which one of you is the new master of the Bloodsword sect?" Although he said that, Fang Yan's gaze remained fixed on Jianqin. From where Jianqin stood, he had already determined that Luo Duo had been injured by Jianqin. Jianqin's expression did not change at all. He clasped his hands calmly and said, "I am the new master of the Bloodsword sect. May I ask what advice you have for me?" Jianqin could already tell that the two Holy Emperor experts who had come to reinforce him were at the 5th and 6th heavenly layers, respectively. People like that were no threat to him. Fang Yan's expression sank slightly as he said, "I don't dare to give you any advice. However, not only did Sect Master step into the territory of my Felicity Empire without permission, you even injured my Felicity Empire's Imperial Protector. If Sect Master doesn't give me an explanation for this matter, where will my Felicity Empire's face go?" Jianqin's eyes immediately lit up when he heard that they were experts from the Felicity Empire. He said, "So you're actually from the Felicity Empire. You've come at the perfect time. May I know if the king of the blood sword is from your Felicity Empire? That's right. My Felicity Empire just happens to have someone like that. May I ask what your relationship is with the king of the blood sword? The Imperial Protector Fong Yen stared closely at Jianqin. An enemy, someone I have to kill. Jianqin's voice was heavy. As he spoke, a powerful killing intent radiated from him. The expressions of the Imperial Protector Fong Yen and Taji both changed when they heard Jianqin's words. Taji stepped through the air and arrived 100 meters away with an extremely sharp presence. He growled, "Master of the Blood Sword Sect, looks like you're determined to become enemies with my Felicity Empire. Since that's the case, let me witness the strength of the Master of the Blood Sword Sect first. Let's see just how capable you are compared to Houston for you to be so arrogant." Taji extended a finger, and the silent world force in the surroundings immediately became abnormally lively. It gathered at the tip of Taji's finger with unbelievable speed, condensing into a powerful strand of force that shot toward Jianqin in a single moment. Taji's strength was on par with the 6th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. He was even more powerful than Fong Yen, so Jianqin was unable to deal with such an attack as easily as he had dealt with Luo Duo. He immediately pulled out the Emperor armament from his space ring and stabbed out with lightning-like speed. A gray streak of light shot out from the tip of the Emperor armament. It tore through space with a devastating presence, shooting toward Taji with lightning-like speed. The gray sword Qi shot forward like a hot knife through butter. It pierced through the force of the world that Taji had condensed and continued onward without slowing down at all. Taji's expression changed slightly. He had never thought that the new sect master of the Blood Sword Sect would be so powerful. He immediately raised his guard. At the same time, an extremely powerful saint force wildly surged out of his body, quickly condensing into a 3-finger-wide sword in his right hand. He then swung out with lightning-like speed, producing a powerful and sharp sword Qi that collided with Jianqin's gray sword Qi. Boom! The 2 strands of sword Qi collided, erupting with a great rumble. The powerful ripples of energy caused the surrounding space to constantly tremble. The sword Qi from the base of the tower dispersed in the air, dispersing into the surroundings as the most primitive form of energy. However, the sword Qi formed from chaotic force remained intact. It continued to shoot toward the base of the tower, arriving before it in the blink of an eye. Taji's expression drastically changed. It was already too late for him to dodge, so he could only raise his sword to block in front of him. When the sword Qi formed from chaotic force collided with the saint weapon in front of Taji, it immediately erupted with a loud boom. Taji's body was blown back uncontrollably. He only stabilized himself after flying for over 10 kilometers. He was filled with shock. He had been completely stunned by the strength of the new sect master of the Blood Sword Sect. He found it very hard to believe that the new sect master of the Blood Sword Sect would be able to block a single strand of sword Qi with a strength at the 6th heavenly layer as a holy emperor. The new sect master was just too powerful. The Imperial Protector of Taji has actually been knocked back by a single strike from the new sect master of the Blood Sword Sect. How is this possible? Am I seeing things? The Imperial Protector of Taji is a holy emperor at the 6th heavenly layer. Luo Duo's eyes widened as he stared at the Imperial Protector of Taji in disbelief. His heart churned. An emperor armament. It's actually an emperor armament. Fong Yen cried out as he stared at the emperor armament in Jianqin's hand. His face was filled with envy and shock. Taji held his sword in his right hand as he fused with the space around him. He crossed over 10 kilometers with a single step and arrived beside Fong Yen. He stared at the emperor armament in Jianqin's hand in interest, and only sighed after quite a while. It really is an emperor armament. The emperor armament really is powerful. It's all thanks to the emperor armament that the sect master of the Blood Sword Sect could force me back in a single strike. If it weren't for the emperor armament, you definitely wouldn't be my opponent. Fang Yan's eyes turned cold. He said, Taji, since we're not the opponent of the new sect master of the Blood Sword sect alone, let's work together. We can't weaken the name of our Felicity Empire, no matter what. That's for the best. Taji agreed without any hesitation. A surging presence radiated from his body as he charged toward Jianqin with Fang Yan. Jianqin's eyes turned cold. He said, I was already merciful with the strike earlier. Since you don't know what's good for you, don't blame me for being rude. With that, Jianqin's presence suddenly changed. At that moment, he seemed to have become a supreme sword as he radiated with an extremely sharp sword chi. The emperor armament in his hand suddenly trembled as he swung out without holding back at all. It turned into an extremely powerful sword chi that pierced through space and shot toward Fang Yan. The strike was comparable to the full-powered strike of a 7th heavenly layer expert, like the Holy Emperor. Wherever the sword chi passed by, space would be ripped apart. From afar, it seemed like a black streak of light. Afterward, Jianqin charged forward with his sword and continued toward Taji. The emperor armament in his hand shone with a black light as it stabbed out 3 times with a destructive presence. Jianqin's 3 strikes moved extremely quickly, leaving behind afterimages in the air. It seemed like all 3 strikes had been launched at the same time. Fang Yan was only at the 5th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. So how could he fend off Jianqin's sword chi that possessed the might of the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor? He was heavily injured by the sword chi, which pierced through his chest and left behind a hole. Taji became extremely stern as he faced Jianqin's 3 strikes. He used all his strength as a Holy Emperor at the 6th heavenly layer to block Jianqin's 3 strikes. However, due to the difference in strength, Taji was only able to block 2 strikes before the 3rd one pierced his heart. His entire body was pierced by the emperor armament. Bang! Jianqin kicked Taji in the chest, sending him flying far away as blood spurted from his mouth. In the blink of an eye, the imperial protector who had hurried over from the Felicity Empire had all been heavily injured by Jianqin. Chapter 10:26. The 2 imperial protector, Taji and Fang Yan, hovered in the air with pale faces. Blood dripped from the corner of their mouths. Their snow-white robes had been dyed red, making them seem extremely miserable. Jianqin did not kill the 2 of them. The Tianyuan continent would face a calamity in the near future. The 2 of them were at the 5th and 6th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, so they would be the main force in fending off the invasion of the world of forsaken saints in the future. The 2 of you are nowhere near my opponent. You can leave. In the future, you are not allowed to interfere with the matters of the Blood Sword sect, or you will be opposing the Blood Sword sect. Jianqin stowed away the emperor armament and calmly said to the 2 of them. Taji and Fang Yan looked at each other. Their faces were both ugly. They glanced at the heavily injured Luo duo nearby and gently sighed. Without saying anything else, they directly ripped open space gates and left. After the battle earlier, the 2 of them knew that Jianqin possessed the strength to kill them. However, he had shown mercy in the end, so the 2 of them could not say anything else. Taji and Fang Yan left and returned to the Felicity Empire together. With the 2 of them gone, Luo Duo lost his greatest support. His face immediately became ashen, but very soon a gleam of light flashed through his eyes. Without any hesitation, he immediately ripped open a space gate in an attempt to escape. However, before his space gate could fully form, Jianqin suddenly appeared beside him. He directly punched the air, causing it to violently tremble. He forcefully stopped the space gate from forming. You have extremely great killing intent for the Blood Sword sect. If I spare you today, you'll definitely cause great damage to the Blood Sword sect once you become stronger in the future, so it's best if you stay behind. Jianqin's aura soared to the sky as he stared coldly at Luo Duo. Then he punched Luo Duo's chest, causing it to cave in. His bones and internal organs were all reduced to dust. Blood gushed out of Luo Duo's mouth. Luo Duo tried his best to hold back his injuries as he coldly stared at Jianqin and yelled, "I am the Imperial Protector of Felicity. If you kill me, the Felicity Empire will definitely flatten your blood sword sect. Houston will not live for long. He will not be able to protect the blood sword sect." Jianqin's face instantly sank when he heard this, and his eyes emitted surging killing intent as he said in a low voice, "You dare be disrespectful to Uncle Xiao? You're courting death." Jianqin radiated with terrifying killing intent. He strode through the air as he chased after Luo Duo. A faint layer of chaotic force radiated from his fist as he punched toward Luo Duo's head. Luo Duo's head was directly blown to pieces by Jianqin's furious punch. Before his soul could escape, it directly dispersed, having been wiped out. Even in death, Luo Duo had never thought that not only would his words save his life, but they would even hasten his death. Luo Duo, the Imperial Protector. The 4 Imperial Protector of the Kingdom of Longqi personally witnessed Luo Duo's death. They were all devastated. Jianqin glanced at the 4 sorrowful Imperial Protectors. Perhaps it was because his current increase in strength had affected his mentality, but he could not be bothered to deal with the 4 saint rulers of the Kingdom of Longqi unless there was some unresolvable grievance between the 2 of them. Jianqin no longer glanced at the 4 saint rulers of the Kingdom of Longqi. He directly flew toward the imperial palace of the Kingdom of Longqi. His soul had already locked onto the presences of Old Man Situ and Old Man Mateng. Seeing that Jianqin had no intentions of making things difficult for the 4 saint rulers of the Kingdom of Longqi, the 4 protectors no longer looked at them. One of them took Luo Duo's space ring before following Jianqin to a remote place in the imperial palace. At this moment, Old Man Situ and Old Man Mateng were lying in front of the door in fear. They observed the situation outside through a tiny crack in the door. The 2 of them gently trembled as their lips trembled. Their eyes were filled with deep fear. The 2 of them had carefully observed the battle in the sky from where they were hiding. They obviously were not unfamiliar with Jianqin's appearance because they had hunted down Jianqin in the Holy Emperor's kingdom a few years ago. Yet now, Jianqin had actually heavily injured 2 Holy Emperor-level experts right in front of their eyes. Moreover, he had killed one of them effortlessly. The 2 of them were deeply shocked by his supreme strength. They could not believe that it was all real. SS, Old Man Situ, why? Why? Do you think he's really Jianqin? Old Devil Ma Tung transmitted his voice in a trembling voice. One could clearly hear his teeth chattering, producing a gurgling sound. It's over, it's over. It's over now. How has Jianqin suddenly become so powerful? I clearly remember that he was weaker than the 2 of us when we met him in the City of God last time. Old Man Situ's face was completely devoid of blood. At this moment, his heart had already been replaced by a thick sense of fear. Suddenly, Ma Teng's face drastically changed. He cried out, "Oh no, they're heading in our direction. How did I forget? The experts of the Blood Sword sect have ways to find us. Run." Ma Teng and Situ no longer cared about hiding themselves. They directly smashed through the roof and fled into the distance as quickly as they could. Seeing the true enemy who had killed his parents, Jianqin's uncontrollable killing intent immediately erupted. It permeated the air, causing the temperature of the surroundings to plummet. He shouted, "Do you really think you can escape from me?" Jianqin's shout was extremely loud and clear. It was like a thunderclap in the sky, deafening everyone. Situ and Ma Teng froze. They immediately trembled from Jianqin's shout. They subconsciously stopped as fear filled their hearts. Before a Holy Emperor expert, the 2 of them did not even have the ability to escape with their meager strength. Jianqin walked through the air with a sunken face. His tremendous presence had already locked onto Situ and Ma Teng. immediately making them feel like a huge mountain was pressing down on them. Even breathing became difficult. Suddenly, Situ and Ma Tung dropped to their knees at the same time. They constantly kowtowed to Jianchen and begged, "Senior Jianchen, please spare us. That matter really has nothing to do with us." It was the Tiger King of the Gilligan clan who arranged everything behind the scenes. The Tiger King forced us to do that. If we didn't obey, he would have killed us. Senior Jianchen, the main culprit is the Tiger King, not us. We're only pawns in the Tiger King's hands. Yeah, Senior Jianchen, we're only pawns in the Tiger King's hands. We can't even protect ourselves, so it's useless even if you kill us. Please be magnanimous and forgive us. If you want revenge, go find the Tiger King. The Tiger King is your true enemy. Ma Tung imitated Situ and loudly begged for mercy. He acted like he had been wronged, making him seem as pitiful as he could be. Jianchen coldly stared at Situ and Ma Tung. The killing intent in his eyes did not weaken at all. Instead, it became even more powerful. He slowly pulled out the emperor armament from his space ring. Jianchen would never let these two people who had killed his parents die so easily. Situ and Ma Tung became even more frightened when they saw Jianchen pull out the emperor armament. They moved their hands together and took out the items in their space rings one by one. Senior Jianchen, if you let us go, everything in our hands will be yours. These Class 7 monster cores, these vast amounts of purple coins, and this wondrous great divination technique will all be yours. That's right, that's right. Senior Jianchen, the great divination technique is an ancient divine book. There's only one of it on the Tian Yuan continent. The two of us risked our lives to obtain it in a desperate situation. The value of this book definitely surpasses our names. Senior Jianchen, you won't lose out at all if we use this book to exchange for our names. Situ and Ma Tung both held a book high above their heads politely. It was obvious that the two books had been split into two with a single glance. It's useless no matter what you say. I will definitely kill you today, Jianchen said word by word. His voice was extremely cold. With that, he immediately stabbed out with the emperor armament in his hand. With a tremble of his arm, the emperor armament turned into a series of blurs, enveloping the two old men. He had already stabbed out countless times in a short moment with unbelievable speed. The blurs overlapped, enveloping the entire region. It was impossible to tell what was real and what was fake. Arg! Situ and Ma Tung cried out miserably. Flesh and blood splattered in the area enveloped by the sword silhouettes. Pieces of minced flesh and a red mist of blood drifted down from the sky, dyeing the space red. Situ and Ma Tung constantly cried out. Their voices became more and more miserable, becoming more and more painful. It was hair-raising. A while later, Jianchen's sword finally stopped. Aside from their heads, the two old men had been reduced to blood-red skeletons. Not a speck of flesh remained. Even their organs had vanished. The saint weapons in their dantian had been dispersed by Jianchen, so the two of them had been frozen in the air by Jianchen's ability to freeze space. Otherwise, they probably would not have been able to hover in the air at all. Jianchen, just kill us if you want to. Why torture us like this? Old man Situ roared in a hoarse voice. He really could not bear this kind of torture. This was simply not something that a human being could endure. It won't be that easy if you want me to kill you with a single strike. I will make you pay double for the blood debt from back then. I will cut you to pieces, Jianchen said through gritted teeth. Afterward, he swung the emperor armament again, chipping away their bones bit by bit. Jianchen tortured Situ and Ma Tung for 4 whole hours. Only when their heads remained did he destroy their souls, causing them to vanish from the world forever. Chapter 10:27. Although the methods used against Ma Tung and Situ were rather cruel, they had killed Jianchen's parents. The pain that Jianqin felt was not something that could be compensated for by physical pain. Jianqin knew that if the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect had not arrived in time, Lore City and Changyang Prefecture probably would have been wiped out. The strong preyed on the weak. This was the law of survival in this world. There was no reason to speak of. Strength was the supreme authority that determined everything. Rui Jin, Blackfish, Honglian, and the others stood behind Jianqin silently with the 4 protectors. Their expressions did not change at all. The bloody storms they had experienced in the past were not something that Jianqin could imagine. What had they not seen before was completely normal to them. After a long while, Jianqin finally calmed down a little. He lowered his head slightly and quickly descended from the sky, landing on the ground. The great divination technique that had fallen from Situ and Ma Ting's hands lay on the ground silently. The yellowed leaves quickly flipped through the pages with a gentle breeze, revealing a large pile of small words. Jianqin waved his hand, and the 2 books were immediately pulled into Jianqin's hand by an invisible force. Jianqin studied the books in his hand. He saw that they were made from an unknown piece of paper and golden thread. The paper was extremely tough and difficult to destroy. The marks of time had left its mark on them. Who knew how long they had been there? These 2 books were indeed one book, but Situ and Ma Tung had split them into 2 by using the golden thread. Each of them held half of the incomplete book. Only when the 2 books were stacked together would they truly be a complete book. What are these books? Why do the 2 of them, Saint Rulers, make them sound so magical? Jianqin mumbled inside before stacking the 2 books together. He flipped to the first page and began to read. Jianqin's eyes gradually lit up as he read through the books. His calm heart began to beat rapidly as well, becoming rather excited. In the end, he could not help but sigh. This really is a divine book. It's actually so magical. The great divination technique was not a so-called powerful battle skill or cultivation method. Instead, it was an extremely wondrous book. Its wondrous aspect was that it could predict the future, understand the truths of the world, and see what would happen in the future. It could also find the person you were looking for and obtain the answer you wanted. It's just too wondrous. It's just too wondrous. I never thought that there would be such a wondrous book in the world. It's unbelievable, Jianqin praised. He was amazed. The wondrous aspects of the great divination technique were just too heaven-defying. Once you grasped the great divination technique, nothing in the world would be able to trap you because you would understand everything. You would be able to see through the fog and see the truth. All schemes and schemes would be useless before you. You would even be able to see through a person's past and present life. The beginning of the great divination technique was written in text, while the back was filled with simple, yet extremely complicated lines and diagrams. Jianqin's soul suddenly shuddered when he saw the lines and diagrams. At that moment, he suddenly experienced a strange feeling. The lines and diagrams seemed to merge with the world and the laws. They seemed simple, but they were filled with endless mysteries. They were extremely profound. The great divination technique is wondrous, but it's extremely difficult to learn. If you want to predict the future, you need to have an extremely deep understanding of the great divination technique, Jianqin thought. He already knew how profound the great divination technique was from the first part of the text. Jianqin thought, a book of Taoism. This is actually a book of Taoism. Suddenly, the voices of the sword spirits rang out in Jianqin's head. Their voices were filled with amazement, as if they were extremely surprised. A book of Taoism? Ziying, Qing Suo, what is a book of Taoism? Jianqin was curious as he communicated with the sword spirits. Master, a book of Taoism is a book that records the Tao. The Tao has different names in different places. It's called the laws of the world here, Qing Suo explained. If that's the case, then the lines and diagrams at the back of the book in my hand are all laws. Jianqin felt rather surprised. Correct. Master, there are many types of Tao. Different people can use different methods to write down different Tao. For example, the book in your hand completely uses lines and diagrams to write down the Tao. It seems simple, but it's extremely difficult to comprehend. However, the Tao recorded in this book is the extremely rare Tao of divination. In our original world, people who comprehend the Tao of divination are extremely rare. Even describing it as rare as phoenix feathers or qilin horns is a bit excessive. This is because the Tao of divination is extremely difficult to comprehend. Moreover, it doesn't possess any offensive abilities, so very few people can walk this path. This is because people who comprehend the Tao of divination are extremely weak in battle. Even if you comprehend the Tao of divination to the peak, you won't be able to defeat people at a lower level than you. This is an extremely unorthodox path, Xing explained. Jianqin's excitement immediately dissipated when he heard that. He sank into his thoughts, and the joy from obtaining the great divination technique completely vanished. Xing, Qing Suo, then do you think I should comprehend the contents of the great divination technique? Jianqin asked after some thought. Master, the great prophecy technique is indeed of little value to others. If one tries to comprehend the Tao of prophecy in a world filled with battles, it would be suicide. Once a battle breaks out, the person who has comprehended the Tao of prophecy will definitely be at a disadvantage. It would be very easy for them to die at the hands of their enemies. However, Master's path of cultivation is different from ordinary people. So Master must comprehend the Tao of divination, Xing said. Must comprehend it? Why is that? Jianqin asked in confusion. Master, the 18 layers of the chaotic body are only separated by Xing and I so that you can better understand the strength of the chaotic body. In reality, in our original world, the chaotic body was split into 4 major realms, which were the minor achievement, partial achievement, major achievement, and great perfection. The 1st to 6th layers of the chaotic body are the minor achievement, the 7th to 12th layers are the partial achievement, and the 13th to 18th layers are the major achievement. As for great perfection, that's for those who have surpassed the 18th layer. Great perfection is the highest realm of the chaotic body, but no one has ever reached the highest realm of the chaotic body. In other words, my chaotic body is still at the partial achievement of the minor achievement. It's still very far from the peak of the minor achievement, Jianqin thought. Master, the minor achievement of the chaotic body only requires energy. However, once you reach the partial achievement of the chaotic body, you need to comprehend the laws of the world. If you want to reach the great perfection of the chaotic body, you need to comprehend 3,000 ways and turn them into origin. Only then can you reach the great perfection of the chaotic body and cultivate true chaotic force. As a result, Master must comprehend the Tao of divination, Xing explained. Jianqin finally felt better with that. He murmured, Looks like the great divination technique I've just obtained isn't completely useless to me. However, reaching the great perfection of the chaotic body is still too far away for me. I'll consider it in the future. The great perfection of the chaotic body was a realm beyond the 18th layer. With Jianqin's current chaotic body at the 3rd layer, he did not dare to hope for that. Chapter 10:28. Jianqin calmed himself down and picked up the space rings that the Situ and Ma Tung had dropped. Afterward, he flew back into the sky and met up with Ruijin and the others. He said, Senior Ruijin, I'll be going to the Felicity Empire soon. Please construct a space gate. Ruijin did not turn down Jianqin's request. He agreed without any hesitation and said, I just happen to have seen the locations of the 3 great empires on the Tianyuan continent, so I know their exact locations. With that, Ruijin extended a finger and casually swiped at the space before him. Space immediately ripped open, quickly forming a space gate. Jianqin stared at Ruijin's simple action without blinking. His eyes shone brightly as he sank into his thoughts. He already knew that once he reached the partial achievement of the chaotic body, his future breakthroughs would no longer be so smooth. He needed to comprehend the laws of the world every time he broke through, so he was especially serious when he watched Ruijin rip open space. Not only does Senior Ruijin's ability to rip open space contain the comprehension of space, but it also contains the control of energy. Space is also a type of law, and energy has its own way as well. Looks like we've already begun to come in contact with laws as saint rulers, but we've only come in contact with the surface, Jianchen murmured inside as he sank into his thoughts. Once I deal with the matters on hand, I'll immediately go to Mercenary City and get Xiaoling to demonstrate the mysteries of the world for me to comprehend. I'll do my best to increase my strength. With the space gate formed, Jianchen, Ruijin, the others, and the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect immediately vanished from the sky above the kingdom of Longqi. Yu had been sent into the artifact space by Jianchen while he was fighting the Holy Emperor. The Felicity Empire was one of the 3 great empires on the Tianyuan continent. It possessed a long history and possessed 2 of the 7 renowned capital cities of the Tianyuan continent. They were the Celestial Star Imperial City and the Thunder City. The Celestial Star Imperial City was the imperial capital of the Felicity Empire, where the imperial palace was located. As the imperial capital of the Felicity Empire and one of the 7 great capital cities of the Tianyuan continent, the prosperity of the Tiangang Royal City went without saying. The city was filled with organizations. There are countless clans of various sizes, and experts were as dense as clouds. However, there was an exception. Although the Celestial Star Imperial City was filled with all sorts of people, it was extremely safe. Fights rarely occurred. Jianchen, Ruijin, and the others directly appeared above the Celestial Star Imperial City through the space gate. They hovered in the air and looked down at the ground below. With a rough glance, they found the Imperial Palace and immediately flew toward it. At this moment, in the Felicity Empire's Imperial Palace, within a majestic hall, the pale-faced Fang Yan and Taji, the 2 imperial protectors who had just fled from the kingdom of Longqi, were sitting cross-legged on a praying mat with their eyes closed as they adjusted their breathing. Opposite the 2 of them was a middle-aged man with a medium build, dressed in a gorgeous, gold-plated robe. He sat there with a gloomy expression on his face. His sharp eyes were filled with anger as he glanced at Fang Yan and Taji. The middle-aged man was extremely handsome. Moreover, he gave off a unique aura of an emperor. He was filled with dignity. He was one of the imperial protectors of the Felicity Empire. His strength surpassed Fang Yan and Taji, having reached the peak of the 7th heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor. At the same time, he was the emperor of the Felicity Empire who had abdicated many years ago, so he was a member of the imperial family. The Blood Sword sect is far too arrogant. They actually dared to injure my Felicity Empire's imperial protector. How preposterous! Moreover, I can feel that the imperial protector's aura has already vanished. He must have met with some mishap. The Blood Sword sect has gone too far. Do they really think that they can trample on the dignity of the Felicity Empire just because they have Houston behind them? The middle-aged man was indescribably furious as he let out a deep roar. The Felicity Empire was one of the 3 great empires of the Tianyuan continent. Even among ancient clans, there were very few people who could match up to them. Obviously, their dignity was more important than anything else. The Blood Sword sect had heavily injured 2 of their imperial protectors without any regard for the consequences, and even killed one of them. This was not something that the Felicity Empire could accept. At the same time, the Holy Emperor was a peak power of the Felicity Empire. Luo Duo's death was an extremely heavy loss to the Felicity Empire because even with the entire Felicity Empire in perspective, there were only a handful of experts who had reached the level of the Holy Emperor. Experts like that could not be obtained just because they wanted to. The middle-aged man immediately stood up from the cushion. Coldness flickered through his eyes as he said, with a deep voice, "Houston actually dares to offend our Felicity Empire before he reaches the end of his life. Looks like he's probably planning on doing something great while he's still alive. If that's the case, let's strike first and wipe out the Bloodsword sect. With the strength of our Felicity Empire, wiping out the Bloodsword sect won't be a problem. But how are we supposed to deal with Houston? At the same time, the Bloodsword sect has a new sect master aside from Houston. He wields an Emperor armament and is extremely powerful. He'll definitely be able to fight you, Taji said with a heavy voice. I'll keep the new sect master busy. As for Houston, I'll leave him to the Ancestral Emperor. Although the Ancestral Emperor is slightly weaker than Houston, Zarkayun and Hao of the Holy Emperor's Empire still owe me a favor. I'll go to the Holy Emperor's Empire right now to find them so that they can assist the Ancestral Emperor. I think the three of them should be more than enough to deal with Houston, the middle-aged man said with a heavy voice. The middle-aged man said in a deep voice. However, as soon as he finished speaking, his eyes narrowed, and he suddenly raised his head to look into the distance. Very soon, Taji and Fang Yen sensed something as well. They both looked into the distance, and their faces immediately became ugly. It's the new sect master of the Bloodsword sect. He's actually come to our Felicity Empire. A gleam of light flashed through the middle-aged man's eyes when he heard that. He snorted coldly, perfect timing. I'd like to see just what you want to do today. New sect master of the Bloodsword sect. With that, the middle-aged man strode outside. None of you are allowed to leave. At this moment, an old voice rang out from the hall. It was filled with an irresistible might. The middle-aged man came to a sudden halt and suddenly turned around. On the throne at the highest point of the hall, an old man with a transcendent aura was already sitting there unknowingly. The middle-aged man's face changed slightly, and he immediately became respectful. He bowed at the old man with Taji and Fang Yen and said, "Greetings to the Ancestral Emperor!" The old man was the Ancestral Emperor of the Felicity Empire. He was over 5,000 years old now, so he was the most senior person in the imperial family. The Ancestral Emperor was not the founding emperor of the Felicity Empire. Instead, it was the title of the most senior and strongest emperor in the imperial family. There would always only be a single person. Stay here. Don't go anywhere. Don't interfere with what's happening outside, the Ancestral Emperor said plainly. Emperor Taizu said calmly, but he looked into the distance. His deep gaze seemed to penetrate through the obstructions of the buildings and directly saw Jianqin and the others flying over. Jianqin, Ruijin, Honglian, and Blackfish directly flew into the imperial palace of the Felicity Empire. They directly landed on the roof of a building. Who are you? Why aren't you going through the main entrance? Don't you know the rules of the Felicity Empire? The baleful force around the four protectors was extremely difficult to conceal. As soon as Jianqin and the others steadied themselves, a yell rang out from the imperial palace. Several saint rulers radiated with powerful presences as they aggressively flew toward where Jianqin and the others stood. They surrounded Jianqin and the others. At the same time, all the imperial guards of the imperial palace were mobilized. They surged out from all directions like a flood, forming a sea of people very soon. They surrounded the building where Jianqin and the others stood. One of the saint rulers who surrounded Jianqin and the others glanced at the four protectors and asked with a deep voice, "You're from the Bloodsword sect?" The four protectors of the Bloodsword sect remained silent. They turned a deaf ear to their words. Jianqin remained emotionless. He coldly glanced past the saint rulers and coldly said, "May I ask if the king is present? Come out and accept your death." Jianqin's voice was very soft, but it reverberated through every corner of the imperial palace. Immediately, the presences of over 20 saint rulers radiated from various parts of the imperial palace. Another 20 saint rulers hurried over, quickly approaching Jianqin and the others. They surrounded Jianqin and the others. They were all hostile. Without a doubt, Jianqin's words indicated that he had come to cause trouble. He was an enemy, not a friend. "Who are you? How dare you cause trouble in the imperial palace of the Felicity Empire? Do you want to die sooner? Brat, you're the first person who's dared to cause trouble in the imperial palace of the Felicity Empire after so many years. If you know what's good for you, tie yourself up quickly and beg for the emperor's forgiveness. Only then will you be spared. The saint rulers who surrounded Gentian all angrily called out. They knew that Gentian's group was not to be trifled with, but this was the imperial palace of the Felicity Empire. It was their territory, and there were several imperial protector present. Gentian's face sank slightly. I have no intentions of becoming your enemy. I have only come to kill the king. Are you going to hand this person over or not? How dare you look down on the dignity of the Felicity Empire? No matter who you are, your crimes are unforgivable. Let's go and capture all these troublemakers and hand them over to the emperor, a saint ruler sternly said. He possessed the strength of a ninth heavenly layer saint ruler, so he seemed to possess great prestige among the group of people. With that, the other saint rulers all began to move. Stop! At this moment, an old voice rang out from the depths of the imperial palace. They could only hear the voice, but they could not see the person. The voice was filled with an irresistible might. The saint rulers who surrounded Jianqin immediately stopped. They all politely bowed toward the depths of the imperial palace. They did not know who had spoken, but they knew that it was definitely an imperial protector. Young man, my Felicity Empire has no grievances with you. May I ask why you've come to cause trouble? The old voice rang out from the depths of the imperial palace. It was the ancestral emperor. Your Felicity Empire's king gathered several million mercenaries to steal my city. Tell me, is that not a grievance? Jianqin growled. He showed no fear at all. Chapter 10:29. All the saint rulers around Jianqin's group were stunned when they heard what the ancestral emperor had said. At that moment, none of them dared to believe their ears, doubting if they had heard wrong. The Felicity Empire was a powerful empire that had stood on the Tianyuan continent for countless years. They were extremely powerful, and their dignity was sacred and inviolable. The Felicity Empire had always dealt with anyone who dared to step on the dignity of the Felicity Empire and cause trouble with them with an iron fist. They would directly teach the troublemakers a heavy lesson. They had never yielded like today, which filled them with disbelief. The current emperor stood outside a dazzling hall in the Felicity Empire. He wore his 9 dragons' robes and a violet gold crown as he gazed at Jianqin's group under the protection of a large group of experts. Your Majesty, what's wrong with the imperial protector today? Why is he asking for peace and even removing him from his position as king? He's an extremely talented saint ruler. Not only has he comprehended saint-tier battle skills that many Holy Emperor experts have failed to grasp, but he's also bound to reach the level of Holy Emperor in the future. Why can't we just give up on a genius like that? Beside the emperor, a majestic middle-aged man in golden armor asked in confusion. The Felicity Empire's attitude toward their enemies clearly did not seem like the Felicity Empire's usual style. The emperor gazed into the depths of the imperial palace. His face was filled with undisguised respect as he murmured, "That's the ancestral emperor's voice. He must have his reasons for doing this." "What? It's the Honorable His Majesty the Great Ancestor." The man's expression changed, and his demeanor suddenly became respectful. Even the faces of the experts around His Majesty changed greatly. They became respectful, and there was even some excitement among them. The ancestral emperor possessed a supreme status in the Felicity Empire. Although he had retired many years ago, every word he said was an imperial edict. Not only could he make decisions that affected the fate of the Felicity Empire, but he could also remove or appoint the current emperor and everyone in the imperial palace. It was just that Emperor Taizu had always been cultivating in the forbidden area behind the imperial palace. He almost never interfered in politics and rarely appeared once in hundreds of years. Very few people were qualified to see him in person and could only hear legends about him from the imperial palace. Therefore, when they learned that the old voice floating from the depths of the imperial palace was Emperor Taizu, everyone was so shocked. Hearing Emperor Taizu's words, a smile appeared on Jian Chen's face. He cupped his fist towards the depths of the palace and said in a clear voice, "Senior is truly a decisive person. Since King Biao is no longer a citizen of the Felicity Empire, this one naturally has no enmity with the Felicity Empire. However, I would like to ask for King Biao to be handed over to this one. Little brother, the king is not in the imperial palace right now. If you want to find him, you might as well go to the Holy Emperor's kingdom. You should be able to find him there," the ancestral emperor said. The Holy Emperor's kingdom, Jian Chen murmured. He did not expect the king to run to the Holy Emperor's kingdom. However, he immediately continued to ask, "The Holy Emperor's kingdom is so big that finding a person is as difficult as ascending to heaven. Senior, please tell me the exact location." "The city of God, Tsar's family," the ancestral emperor said. Hearing this, Genshin's eyes suddenly flashed. The scene of the Tsar's family being attacked from all sides in the city of God suddenly appeared in his mind, causing his face to become somewhat gloomy. "Senior, thank you for telling me. Goodbye." Jianshin cupped his fists towards the depths of the imperial palace, and then left with Ruijin and the others. "Little brother, our Felicity Empire is willing to be friends with you forever. If you have time in the future, you might as well come to our Felicity Empire for a visit." The ancestral emperor's voice came again. His voice drifted far away and clearly passed into Jianshin's ears. After leaving the imperial palace, Jianshin and the others left through a space gate constructed by Ruijin and headed straight for the Holy Emperor's kingdom. After Jianshin left, the middle-aged man in the resplendent palace in the depths of the imperial palace looked at the ancestral emperor in confusion and asked, "Ancestral Emperor, why do we have to speak to them so humbly? Is our Felicity Empire afraid of a mere blood sword sect? As long as we work together with Tsar Kaiyun and Hao Wu, destroying the blood sword sect will be a piece of cake." The ancestral emperor gently sighed when he heard that and said, "Our Felicity Empire is indeed capable of destroying the blood sword sect. However, I never thought that he would become the master of the blood sword sect. What a surprise!" Emperor Taizu's face suddenly became serious. He stared at the three people in front of him and said, "You three must remember that in the future you must not have any conflicts with the blood sword sect. If you meet anyone from the blood sword sect, you must treat them with respect and never offend them. Understand? Ancestral Emperor, just who is the new master of the blood sword sect for you to fear him so much?" The middle-aged man was filled with curiosity. "He's someone we cannot afford to offend. He's the only person who has openly provoked the 10 protector clans in all these years and made the protector clans unable to do anything to him. At the same time, he's offended the Path Lord of Carnal Desires and the 2 great holy emperors of the Beast God continent. Yet he can still strut around the Tian Yuan continent fearlessly." With that, the ancestral emperor stared at the 3 of them deeply and said, "I think you should know who he is." The 3 holy emperor experts became dumbfounded when they heard that. Their faces paled. They finally understood just who they had offended. Although they had never seen Genshin's appearance, they had heard of Genshin's great reputation. Basically, all the peak experts on the Tian Yuan continent knew of Genshin's name. However, there were still a few people who had never seen Genshin's appearance. In the City of Gods of the Holy Empire, Bibi was wearing a luxurious robe embroidered with golden threads. He was currently sitting in the main hall of the Tsar family, chatting with the Tsar family's grand elder with a smile on his face. Although by shoulder to shoulder seemed composed on the surface, no one knew that he was filled with anxiety inside. He was not calm at all. He had learned many days ago that Jianshin had returned in a powerful manner. Not only had he taken back Flame City with lightning speed, but even his father, by Yifei, had died to Jianshin's hands. This filled him with deep fear because he knew that Jianshin would definitely come looking for him. He would never let him go. He had gone to find the ancestral emperor of the Felicity Empire in an attempt to ask him to deal with Genshin, but he had been turned down. Afterward, he had come to the Tsar family of the Holy Emperor's Empire in an attempt to find experts to deal with Genshin. Grand Elder, by shoulder to shoulder, has already stayed here for several days. May I ask if the esteemed senior Tsar Kai-Yun is willing to meet with me? I have something important to tell you. By shoulder to shoulder, finally could not sit still, and made the same request to the Grand Elder. The Grand Elder of the Tsar family was a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler. Although he was stronger than By shoulder to shoulder and belonged to one of the 3 great clans, By shoulder to shoulder was publicly acknowledged as one of the 9 kings with the greatest talent in the Felicity Empire. He also knew a saint tier battle skill, so he treated By shoulder to shoulder politely. Don't be impatient, King Baisho. I have already conveyed your request to the ancestor. If the ancestor wants to see you, he will naturally give the order. King Baisho, please wait here for a few more days, the great elder said with a smile. By shoulder to shoulder's face became ugly. He had already waited here for several days. If this continued, he might not be able to see the ancestor of the Tsar family even if he waited for another year or so. Suddenly, a thought flashed through By shoulder to shoulder's mind. He clasped his hands and said, Grand Elder, please pass on my request to the esteemed senior, Tsar Kai-Yun again. By shoulder to shoulder's relationship with the heavenly enchantress is not shallow. I have heard many things of the past from the heavenly enchantress, including the passionate love between Senior Tsar Kai-Yun and Senior Tsar Kai-Yun. Junior has come this time to offer a plan that can dissolve the barrier between Senior Tsar Kai-Yun and Senior Tsar Kai-Yun, allowing Senior Tsar Kai-Yun to reconcile with Senior Tsar Kai-Yun. Hearing this, the eyes of the Grand Elder of the Tsar family narrowed and immediately became solemn. He stared at By shoulder to shoulder. He said, By shoulder to shoulder, King, is what you said true? If you have deceived the ancestor, the consequences will be extremely severe. Absolutely true. By shoulder to shoulder solemnly swore. Bring him to see me. As soon as By shoulder to shoulder King finished speaking, a cold female voice rang out from the hall. It was impossible to tell where the voice had come from. The Grand Elder hurriedly put down the teacup in his hand and stood up from his chair. He respectfully said, Yes, ancestor. Deep beneath the Tsar family's mansion, there was a huge cavern. Inside the cavern, a purple palace stood silently. By shoulder to shoulder King entered the depths of the cavern under the lead of the Grand Elder. He directly entered the purple palace and stopped in front of a tightly shut secret room. Ancestor, according to your orders, By shoulder to shoulder King has been brought here. The Grand Elder respectfully said to the tightly shut secret room, By shoulder to shoulder, you can leave. A cold female voice rang out from the secret room. Her voice was completely emotionless. Yes, the Great Elder replied respectfully, then immediately left. By shoulder to shoulder King greets the esteemed senior Tsar Kai-Yin. Standing outside the door of the secret room, By shoulder to shoulder's expression became respectful as he bowed deeply. By shoulder to shoulder, you said you have a way to mend the relationship between me and Hawu? Yes, By shoulder to shoulder indeed has a way to mend the relationship between Senior Tsar Kai-Yun and Senior Hawu. Senior Tsar Kai-Yun can give it a try. By shoulder to shoulder carefully said. His heart was filled with nervousness. Speak, what method? Tsar Kai-Yun's voice rang out from the secret room. This time, there was a hint of urgency in her voice. By shoulder to shoulder was about to speak when suddenly a huge aura came from outside and enveloped the entire city of gods. By shoulder to shoulder, who was underground, could clearly feel it. Chapter 1030. Jianqin glanced at the familiar city below him as he hovered in the air. He could not help but think of everything that had happened to him in the past. He could not help but become slightly melancholic. Tsar family of the 8 great clans of the City of God, I, Jianqin, have returned. In the past, all of you worked together to attack me, almost killing me in the city. Today I, Genshin, will look down on your city of God," Genshin said in a deep voice. His gaze became even colder as he spoke. Soon after, an extremely vast presence radiated from him, enveloping the entire city of God. The presence was filled with undisguised battle intent. Many years ago, Genshin possessed extraordinary strength, but he still needed to act carefully in the city of God. There were many experts that he could not afford to provoke, but now he could look down on the entire city of God. He had openly challenged the authority of the 7 capital cities of the Tian-Yuan continent. Genshin's presence alarmed all the people in the city. Regardless of their strength, they could all clearly sense how vast the presence was. Some of the weaker people even felt like a boulder was pressing down on their chests when they faced the presence. They even struggled to breathe. What a tremendous presence! Who is the person who gives off this presence? Is he challenging the city of God? Similar voices rang out everywhere in the city of God. The empty streets were filled with people very soon. At that moment, all the people in their rooms surged out. There were even many people who stood on the roofs and looked at the sky. In the 8 clans of the city of God, the ancestors of the 8 clans all opened their eyes at the same time. They all stared outside in shock. Without any hesitation, they immediately stopped cultivating and left the room as quickly as possible. In the Radiant Saint Master Union, at the very center of the city of God, there was an extremely luxurious room at the highest point of the huge castle. The president of the union sat on the bed with his eyes closed. Suddenly, a tremendous presence appeared from outside, causing the president to open his eyes immediately. He immediately looked outside the window in the direction of the presence and frowned. He said with a heavy voice, "What a powerful presence! A person who can give off such a tremendous presence is at least at the level of the Holy Emperor. Moreover, the presence is accompanied by a powerful battle intent. Even with the entire continent in perspective, there's rarely anyone who can match it. Strange, who is this person? Why is he releasing his battle intent so recklessly in the city of God? He's clearly provoking the Tsar family. However, I don't seem to remember when the Tsar family has offended such a powerful enemy." The president of the Radiant Saint Master Union murmured. He was filled with doubt. At this moment, the door was pushed open and the Grand Elder walked in with a stern expression. As soon as he entered, he said, "The person who's come must be looking for trouble with the Tsar family. He's not weak. President, why don't we go take a look? I hope this person can heavily injure the Tsar family. That way, the pressure on our union will be reduced." The president sank into his thoughts. He carefully sensed the presence, and a sliver of doubt gradually appeared on his face. He said, "That's strange. Grand Elder, why do I feel that this presence is somewhat familiar? It's as if I've seen this person somewhere before. However, I don't remember seeing this presence among all the Holy Emperor experts I've come in contact with. It's really strange, really strange. Who is this person?" Hearing that, the Grand Elder's expression changed, and a sliver of surprise appeared in his eyes. He said, "From what you've said, I also feel that this presence is somewhat familiar. However, I can't remember who it is. President, since we can't guess, why don't we go take a look and see who this person is?" Afterwards, the president and Grand Elder left the Radiant Saint Master Union with several saint rulers. They flew in the direction of the presence with lightning speed. In the Tower of Radiance of the Radiant Saint Master Union, an extremely ordinary-looking old man held a towel as he carefully wiped the tables and books there. Suddenly, the old man's hand paused, and a gleam of light immediately flashed through his indifferent eyes. He murmured, "Looks like the city of God is about to become lively again. I wonder which expert the Tsar family has offended." With that, the old man vanished. He had turned into a faint blur and left the Tower of Radiance with lightning speed. He flew in the direction of the presence. Several thousand meters above the Tsar family in the city of God, Jianshan, Ruijin, and the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect hovered there quietly. Before long, several tremendous presences appeared in the surroundings. They moved extremely quickly, arriving around Jianshan in just a few seconds. They surrounded Jianshan's group 100 meters away. The saint rulers were the ancestors of the 8 clans of the City of God. They were all stern as they stared at Jianshan cautiously. However, none of them dared to make a ruckus because they could tell from Jianshan's presence that he was a supreme expert on par with the Holy Emperor. He was not someone they could provoke. May I ask for Senior's name? Is there some misunderstanding between you and our City of God that has made you so angry? An ancestor of the 8 clans clasped his hands at Jianshan. He spoke extremely politely. Jianshan coldly glanced past the ancestors of the 8 clans. His gaze was extremely sharp, like 2 unsheathed swords. Anyone who met his gaze would feel like they had been stabbed by a sword. They would feel a slight pain, making them shiver. Senior? Ha 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 ha. I never thought that I would actually become the senior you speak of. People of the 8 clans, have you forgotten about me so quickly? Open your eyes and take a good look at who I am. Jianshan laughed aloud. His voice was filled with mockery. With that, the saint rulers of the 8 clans immediately began to carefully study Jianshan. Very soon, one of them recognized Jianshan, and his face drastically changed. Disbelief filled his face as he involuntarily cried out, "Why, you're Yang Yutian. You're Jianshan." The expressions of all the saint rulers of the 8 clans drastically changed when they heard the name Jianshan. Shock filled their eyes. They were unable to connect the Holy Emperor before them, who radiated with a tremendous presence, to the young man who had almost died in the City of God several years ago. Other than that, the ancestors of the 8 clans learned something else as well. Jianshan's background came from one of the 10 protector clans of Changyang Prefecture. He was a direct descendant of the protector clans of Changyang Prefecture, so his status was incomparable to theirs. At this moment, 2 streaks of white light shot through the sky, quickly flying over. The President and Grand Elder of the Union stood on a cloud completely condensed from radiant saint force as they flew over with a few other saint rulers. Yang Yutian, you're Yang Yutian. The President and Grand Elder recognized Jianshan with a single glance, and both cried out. At that moment, the 2 of them could no longer maintain their usual composure. Shock filled their faces. They struggled to believe that the person who radiated with such a tremendous presence was actually the most outstanding genius in the history of the Union, Yang Yutian. Jianshan also discovered the arrival of the President and Grand Elder. His expression immediately became rather mixed, but it disappeared very quickly. Now was not the time to catch up with them. Jianshan, have you come to the City of God to avenge what happened in the past? At this moment, a cold female voice rang out from the sky. With that, a middle-aged woman in a violet dress silently appeared in the sky, facing Jianshan from afar. Greetings to Senior. The ancestors of the 8 clans all bowed when they saw the middle-aged woman. Their faces were filled with respect. The middle-aged woman was the ancestor of the Tsar family, Tsar Kaiyun. Tsar Kaiyun directly ignored the greetings of the ancestors. She stared at Jianshan and the others closely. When her gaze landed on Ruijin and Black Fish behind Jianshan, she immediately became extremely stern. You should be the ancestor of the Tsar family. In the past, you wanted to steal the winged tiger from me and even wanted to kill me. Do you still remember? Jianshan stared at Tsar Kaiyun coldly. Tsar Kaiyun could not help but think of what had happened in the past when she heard that. Her gaze towards Jianshan immediately became rather soft. She stood up and gently sighed. Jianshan, I never thought that you would become so powerful in just a few years. However, I had no choice in the matter back then. The ancient winged tiger was with you, and the beast god continent had invaded our continent because of the winged tiger. In order to save the continent, we could only return the winged tiger to the beast god continent. Otherwise, the Tianyuan continent would have been destroyed. Could you bear to see that happen? Jianchen was emotionless as he coldly said, "We'll deal with our grievances from back then later. Ancestor of the Tsar family, let me ask you, is the Bijou king of the Feelist continent with you?" "Bijou is indeed with our Tsar family," Tsar Kaiyun gently replied without any emotion. Chapter 1031. Tsar Tsayun's face immediately changed when she heard Jianchen's words. She said, "Jianchen, I don't care what enmity you have with Bai Shou, but I hope that you can resolve it in the future. Right now, I won't hand Bai Shou over to you. Since you won't hand over Bai Shou, I can only go to the Tsar family personally." Jianchen's gaze became rather cold. Powerful battle intent and killing intent appeared from him at the same time, rapidly rising. The Emperor armament had already appeared in his right hand. Chaotic force filled with a destructive presence slowly radiated from it, constantly revolving around the Emperor armament. "Hold on." At this moment, an old voice rang out with some urgency. An old man in his 70s flew over with lightning-like speed. He held a person in his hand. It was Bai Shou. The Tsar family currently had 2 Holy Emperor experts. Aside from Tsar Kaiyun, there was only this old man. "Jianchen, old man Tsar Femor greets you." The old man first politely greeted Jianchen before continuing. "Jianchen, our Tsar family is willing to hand Bai Shou to you. We hope that our enmity can be resolved peacefully. At the same time, we are willing to apologize for what we did to you in the past. We hope that we can bury the hatchet." The old man was filled with sincerity. He did not want to become enemies with Jianchen at all. Bai Shou was immobilized in Tsar Femor's hand. He paled in fright when he heard what Tsar Femor said because he knew extremely well just what would happen to him if he ended up in Jianchen's hands. "Senior Kaiyun, save me. Senior Kaiyun, save me. If I die, Senior Kaiyun, you will never be forgiven by Senior Limitless." Bai Shou begged for mercy. He had placed all his hopes on Tsar Kaiyun. Tsar Tsayun's face sunk as determination filled her eyes. With a slight sway of her body, she silently arrived beside Tsar Femor. Her slender hand struck toward Tsar Femor with extremely powerful energy. At the same time, Tsar Tsayun's free left hand reached toward Bai Shou. "Kaiyun, are you crazy? What are you doing?" Tsar Femor's face drastically changed. He had never thought that Tsar Kaiyun would suddenly attack him. He was her great-grandfather. Although it had all happened suddenly, Tsar Femor was still a battle-hardened Holy Emperor expert. Tsar Tsayun's attack suddenly, but he reacted in the shortest amount of time. He showed her attack. His hand was covered with old skin. He gathered a dense amount of world force in a single moment. His hand. "Bai Shou, Kaiyun, S. Kaiyun, S. Femor, Bai, Femor, S. Femor, S. Face as Sion, S. Femes." Although Tsar Kaiyun was Tsar Tsayun Sr. and was much older than her, his strength was far inferior to hers. Tsar Tsayun's casual palm strike sent him flying far away, and he only managed to regain control of his body after flying a few thousand meters. On the other hand, Tsar Kaiyun was still floating in her original position as steady as Mount Tai. Her figure didn't even sway. It was as if she had just casually struck out with her palm. She had also snatched the Bijou king from Tsar Tsayun's hand and imprisoned him in front of her left palm by an invisible force. "Go down and stay there," Tsar Kaiyun said coldly. She then threw Biao Wang down into the courtyard of the Tsar family. Tsar Femor had only been sent flying by Tsar Tsayun's palm strike, so he was not injured at all. Tsar Femor immediately panicked when he saw how Tsar Kaiyun wanted to protect Bijou Wang. He immediately flew over from afar and begged, "Kaiyun, do you know what you're doing right now? Have you ever thought about what kind of disaster you're bringing our clan into? Have you ever considered the benefits of the clan? Kaiyun, don't do anything stupid. Bijou Wang is not related to our clan at all. Just listen to your great-grandfather's advice and hand him over for the sake of the clan. There's no need for you to bring the entire clan into danger for an outsider." Zarkayun remained unmoved. She coldly stared at Tsar Femor as a sliver of unconcealable resentment appeared in the depths of her eyes. She coldly said, "Do you still remember what happened in the past? It was because of your forceful interference that Hau and I were separated, causing me to live in pain for the rest of my life. Back then, I only hated that I was not strong enough and could not resist the orders of elders like you. I could only obey. But now, I, Zarkayun, am no longer the Tsar, Kayun of the past. Whatever I want to do now, you no longer have the qualifications and ability to control me." Hearing Tsar Tsayun's cold voice, Tsar Femor felt as if his heart was being pierced by needles. He painfully said, "Kayun, what happened in the past was indeed your great-grandfather's fault. It was your great-grandfather who let you down. It was your great-grandfather who ruined your happiness. However, you are still a member of the Tsar clan. The blood of the Tsar clan flows in your veins. Could it be that you have the heart to watch the Tsar clan decline? Tsar clan, don't talk to me about the Tsar clan. In your eyes, there's only the Tsar clan." Tsar Tsayun's emotions suddenly became somewhat agitated. Her beautiful eyes shot out a glint of shock as she stared sharply at Tsar Femor. Pain and resentment coexisted as she gritted her teeth and said, "Since you are so afraid that I will bring trouble to the Tsar clan, then from now on, I, Zarkayun, will sever all ties with your Tsar clan. From today onwards, whatever I do has nothing to do with your Tsar clan." Hearing this, the expressions of the saint rulers of the 8 great clans and the experts of the Tsar clan greatly changed. "Don't, ancestor. You are the spiritual pillar of our Tsar clan. You can't abandon us." The experts of the Tsar clan all knelt in the void, each and every one of them incomparably sorrowful. "No, Kayun, you can't do this. You can't do this. Even if your ancestor has made thousands of mistakes, you can't treat the clan like this. The clan can't do without you." Tsar Femor bitterly lamented as tears streamed down his face. His heart was filled with regret. Personally witnessing this scene, the president and grand elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union looked at each other. The scene before them had far exceeded their expectations. Before they came, they had never thought that such a huge change would happen to the Tsar clan. As the strongest ancestor of the Tsar clan, Zarkayun had actually announced that she was leaving the Tsar clan. This was a shocking matter. Zarkayun painfully closed her eyes. She had stayed in the Tsar clan for so long, and it was not that she had no feelings for them. It was just that between her clan and love, the latter was clearly more important in her eyes. For so many years, there has always been a barrier between Hau and I. Since Tsar clan has a method to remove the barrier between Hau and me, I will protect Tsar clan no matter what. Even if I die here today, I will not hesitate." Zarkayun thought to herself. Soon after, her tightly shut eyes suddenly opened. The moment she opened her eyes, Tsar Tsayun's entire presence underwent an overwhelming change. A supreme battle intent that was no weaker than Jianshin's surged out from her body, soaring into the sky. At this moment, Tsar Tsayun's eyes no longer held any pain. Instead, they were filled with determination. "Looks like you have no choice but to protect Tsar clan." Jianshin snorted coldly. His presence rose steadily, vaguely showing signs of wanting to compete with Zarkayun. Tsar Tsayun's gaze was sharp and cold. A faint green sword had already appeared in her hand. She said, "Jianshin, if you want to kill Tsar clan, you'll have to step over my dead body." With that, Zarkayun took the initiative to attack. As the faint green sword in her hand danced gently, she stabbed out gently. Chapter 1032. Jianshin's gaze suddenly became extremely sharp. Although Tsar Tsayun's attack did not create an earth-shaking disturbance, it made Jianchen become much more vigilant. He felt deeply threatened. Tsar Psaiyun's strength had completely exceeded Jianchen's. Let me deal with her. Jianchen stopped Ruijin and the others. His battle intent became even more powerful as a surging sword qi radiated from him. Even though Tsar Kaiyun was very powerful, she was not undefeatable. Strands of chaotic force surged out from Jianchen's dantian, flowing through every corner of his body in a single moment. He pushed the defenses of the chaotic body to the limit. Jianchen's chaotic body had reached the third layer. Every single strand of chaotic force was condensed from tremendous amounts of energy. In particular, a single strand of chaotic force at the third layer was equivalent to the energy of a holy emperor who had just reached the third layer. As a result, Jianchen's chaotic force was consumed extremely slowly in battle. If he used it to defend himself, the rate of consumption was basically negligible. The emperor armament in Jianchen's hand began to gently tremble. It produced a gentle thrum before shooting out with destructive chaotic force. It received Tsar Psaiyun's attack fearlessly. Jianchen, your opponent has reached the peak of the 8th heavenly layer. She's about to reach the 9th heavenly layer, so be careful. Ruijin's voice rang out in Jianchen's head. Ruijin could tell Tsar Psaiyun's strength with a single glance, so he cautiously warned Jianchen. Jianchen became even more stern. With the power of the emperor armament, he could unleash the strength of a holy emperor at the peak of the 7th heavenly layer. He was still a level weaker than Tsar Kaiyun. Jianchen and Tsar Kaiyun clashed a few times with lightning-like speed. The battle was extremely intense and created a great disturbance. Every time their swords collided, it was like worlds were colliding, erupting with great booms. The ground cracked and space was obliterated. Violent ripples of energy and scattered sword qi were sent flying in all directions, forcing all the saint rulers in the surroundings to retreat time and time again. They stayed far away to avoid being caught in the crossfire. The City of God was one of the 7 capital cities of the Tianyuan continent. It had stood on the Tianyuan continent for countless eras, and it had remained standing even after the ancient wars. Obviously, it possessed defensive abilities. At this moment, an extremely huge barrier had risen above the City of God. It enveloped the entire city, blocking the scattered sword qi and ripples of energy that shot over. Although its defensive power was nowhere near as great as the barrier of Mercenary City, Jianchen and Tsar Psaiyun's attacks were unable to shake the barrier at all. At this moment, all the streets and alleys in the City of God were filled with people. The various buildings were filled with people, to the point where the roofs had almost collapsed. Everyone in the City of God was standing on the streets, looking up at the sky. They couldn't take their eyes off this rare, world-shaking battle. There was also a lot of discussion going on. Jianchen rapidly retreated. He had already begun to lose the upper hand. Although Tsar Kaiyun was a woman, she was still a supreme expert who was about to reach the 9th heavenly layer. Every single one of her attacks possessed devastating power. Ruijin, Blackfish, and Honglian all stared at Jianchen. They were ready to take action at any time. Jianchen was their only hope of returning to their clansmen, so they viewed Jianchen's life as more important than anything else. At this moment, an old wooden hut stood silently on a mountain peak in the depths of an ancient forest several tens of thousand kilometers away from the City of God. The fierce wind in the sky caused the door to creak as it blew against it. It seemed like it could collapse at any time. Within the small wooden house, there was a middle-aged man who wore a white robe and was filled with an exuberant, heroic spirit between his brows. He had his eyes closed as he sat cross-legged on the wooden bed in cultivation. He was like an old monk in meditation, and he didn't move for a long time. Suddenly, the middle-aged man abruptly snapped open his eyes. Immediately, 2 visible streaks of light shot out from his eyes, causing the space before him to tremble slightly. The middle-aged man's eyes were extremely bright. He stared in the direction of the city of God with interest. He frowned slightly and murmured, "There's actually a battle between experts in the city of God. One of them has Tsayun's presence. What's going on there?" The middle-aged man was Hao Wu, who had gone to the continent where the 100 races resided and fought against a Class 8 magical beast before taking away its essence blood to cure the Grand Elder of the Radiant Saint Master Union. Hao Wu frowned as he sat on the bed. The light in his eyes flickered as he hesitated. He struggled to make up his mind. He murmured, "Should I go and take a look?" Hao Wu hesitated for quite a while before making up his mind in the end. He said, "Whatever. I'll just hide in the distance and take a look. I'll understand what's going on there." With that, Hao Wu vanished. He had silently made his way toward the city of God with unbelievable speed. The battle between Jianqin and Czar Kaiyun in the city of God rapidly grew further and further away. Very soon they had left the city and arrived in a barren mountain range 100 kilometers away. They began to fight in the air above the mountain range. "Jianqin, you're not my opponent. If you promise me that you won't kill Bai Shou, we'll stop right now," Czar Kaiyun said coldly. "If we're talking about strength, I'm naturally not your opponent. But if we're talking about swordsmanship, I don't necessarily lose to you. I have to kill Bijouang. There's no room for negotiation." Jianqin refused without any hesitation. It was impossible for him to let Bijouang go. With that, Jianqin's arm suddenly jolted. The Emperor armament immediately transformed into a dense cluster of blurs that filled the space before him. They rapidly enveloped Czar Kaiyun. It was difficult to tell which of the blurs were real, as if every single one of them was real. They possessed great offensive power, which was a result of extreme speed. At the same time, Jianqin used the illusory flash to move around Czar Kaiyun like a ghost. He struck out with his sword with each strike faster than the last. He struck out with his full strength every single time, comparable to a full-powered strike from a peak 7th heavenly layer expert, like the Holy Emperor. Czar Tsayun's body and space allowed her to dodge Jianqin's attacks with ease. She did not use her eyes to look at the blurs in the surroundings. She struck out with her sword purely based on her instincts. She would perfectly block the attacks hidden in the blurs with each stab. She coldly said, "If that's the case, don't blame me for being merciless." A surging energy surged out from Czar Tsayun's body, causing the space around her to distort. Czar Kaiyun pointed her sword at the sky, and immediately a dense azure light erupted. The terrifying energy was enough to break through space. "Heavenly Maiden scatters blossoms." Czar Kaiyun cried out, and the terrifying energy gathered in her sword immediately erupted. It turned into extremely dense sword chi that shot out in all directions. Every single strand of sword chi was no weaker than a casual strike from an 8th heavenly layer expert like the Holy Emperor. Jianqin's face changed slightly. He quickly retreated with the illusory flash and used the Emperor armament to block the storm-like attack of sword chi. Every single strand of sword chi that collided with the Emperor armament caused Jianqin's arm to become numb. "Spatial freeze!" A gleam of light flickered through Czar Tsayun's eyes. She pointed at where Jianqin was standing with her left hand and immediately froze the space there, trapping Jianqin there firmly. Spurt! 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 With his body restrained, over a dozen powerful sword chi immediately pierced Jianqin's body, creating over a dozen finger-sized holes on Jianqin's body. Bright red blood immediately flowed from the wounds. Jianqin bellowed at the sky. Destructive chaotic force immediately erupted from his body. At the same time, the Emperor armament in his hand shone with a black light, breaking through space with supreme force and regaining his freedom. However, Czar Kaiyun had already silently arrived before Jianqin at this moment. Her sword shone with a dazzling azure light as she stabbed toward Jianqin's throat mercilessly. Chapter 1033. The sudden change in Jianqin's presence immediately caused Czar Tsayun's face to change. Her sword that stabbed toward Genshin could not help but slow down slightly. This was because Czar Kayun felt like Genshin was no longer a person of flesh and blood. Instead, he was a shining sword that stood in the surroundings, radiating with a shocking sword chi. Czar Kayun felt like she was facing a sword as she faced Genshin, which shocked her greatly. Ruijin, Blackfish, and Honglian's eyes narrowed as well. They all stared at Genshin in surprise. At that moment, the three of them actually had the same thought as Czar Kayun. The current Genshin did not seem like a person at all. Instead, he seemed like a sword that had been stabbed into the ground. Is this a battle skill? Blackfish stared at Genshin as he murmured to himself. The Saint Rulers and people from the Radiant Saint Master Union all stared at Genshin in shock as well. Disbelief filled their faces. At that moment, all of them held their breaths. They did not dare to breathe in the air in the surroundings, because the air seemed to have become a sharp sword chi. When they breathed it in, it actually caused their organs to ache. A sliver of confusion appeared in Genshin's eyes, but it quickly turned into comprehension. He seemed to understand something now, as if he had grasped something in his hazy state. The Emperor armament in his hand slowly stabbed out based on the strange feeling in his head. Genshin's stab seemed slow, but it was extremely fast. It gave people the illusion that it was moving at an extremely fast speed. As the sword stabbed out, an extremely pure sword chi immediately erupted, causing space to shatter. This was true sword chi. It was filled with sharpness, and it was much, much more powerful than sword chi condensed from energy. It gave off an indomitable and unstoppable presence. When the Emperor armament collided with Czar Tsayun's sword, the extremely powerful sword chi actually knocked Czar Tsayun's sword to the side. However, the Emperor armament did not slow down at all, stabbing toward Czar Tsayun's chest with an unstoppable force. Spurt! The Emperor armament stabbed into Czar Tsayun's chest, piercing through her body. The sharp sword chi and destructive chaotic force instantly pulverized Czar Tsayun's organs. Czar Kayun grunted as she stared at the Emperor armament in disbelief. She refused to believe that she had actually been injured by Genshin with her strength. However, in the next moment, Czar Tsayun's left hand struck Genshin's chest with lightning-like speed. Terrifying saint force surged from her hand, instantly breaking through the defenses of Genshin's chaotic body with supreme force. It knocked Genshin away while blood spurted from his mouth. The sword in her chest was pulled out with Genshin as he flew back. Genshin, I never thought that you would know a Saint tier battle skill as well. Since you've shown me your Saint tier battle skill, I'll show you mine. Czar Tsayun's presence did not weaken at all. Even though she was slightly pale, she was still extremely valiant. Her injuries did not seem to be anything to her. A terrifying presence radiated from Czar Kayun. It filled the surroundings, causing the sky to tremble. At that moment, Czar Kayun seemed to have become a war goddess. She possessed an extremely tremendous presence, wanting to destroy the world. The surrounding air became sticky, and even space froze bit by bit. A terrifying pressure that seemed to originate from the world slowly descended from the sky, directly causing the mountains to collapse and the ground to sink. Czar Kayun used a Saint tier battle skill with her strength at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer as a holy emperor. Just the tremendous presence possessed enough power to destroy the world. Genshin only managed to stop after being blown over 1,000 meters away by Czar Tsayun's palm strike. Blood dripped from the corner of his mouth, but there was a brief moment of confusion and doubt in his eyes. He continued to think about how he had stabbed out earlier. Genshin felt like he had entered a wondrous state earlier, where he felt like he had become a sword instead of a person. Moreover, he had only stabbed out according to his instincts, but the might within the strike had completely exceeded his strength. It had even injured Czar Kayun, who was at the peak of the 8th heavenly layer. However, he had lost that wondrous feeling now. He could no longer use the same attack a second time. Way of the Tyrant Sword. Sword swallows the galaxy. At this moment, a cry rang out from the sky. Tsar Kayun had already flown 10,000 meters into the air. She shone with azure light as terrifying pulses of energy radiated from her. In the end, it condensed into a 100-meter-long sword above her head before shooting toward Genshin with unparalleled might. As the divine sword pierced through the air, the originally bright sky instantly darkened. Even the yuan qi of the world and the formless power of the world that filled the world dissipated. This divine sword that was completely condensed from energy seemed to contain the power of devouring all the power and light. Genshin became extremely stern. He already could not defeat Tsar Kayun when she did not use a Saint Tier battle skill. If she used a Saint Tier battle skill, he would have no chance at victory at all. Even blocking it would be extremely difficult. With a thought from Genshin, a golden streak of light immediately shot out from between his eyebrows. It quickly turned into a 100-meter-tall golden tower before him, shining with dazzling light. The divine hall of the 8 wastelands had been severely damaged by the king. It was unusable for a short period of time, so Genshin could only use the Saint artifact to block Tsar Kayun's Saint Tier battle skill. Boom! A deafening boom immediately erupted when Tsar Kayun's Saint Tier battle skill collided with the Saint artifact. With her strength as a holy emperor at the 8th heavenly layer, the might of the Saint Tier battle skill was equivalent to a casual strike from a holy emperor. It was extremely terrifying, directly knocking Genshin's Saint artifact far away. Way of the Sword of the Tyrant, Sword of the Void. Tsar Kayun's attack did not stop. Her cold voice rang out from the sky once more. Another 100-meter-long sword condensed above her head, shooting toward Genshin with lightning speed. The attack was filled with destructive power. Wherever the sword passed, space would be reduced to darkness. Way of the Tyrant's Sword. Sword rained devastation. The Way of the Tyrant's Sword was a Saint Tier battle skill that contained 3 attacks. As soon as the second move was used, Tsar Kayun's third move followed. Chapter 1034. Tsar Kayun had used the 3 moves of the Tyrant's Way of the Sword. Every single move was at the peak of Saint Tier battle skills, comparable to a casual strike from a Holy Emperor. Even a great perfection expert like the Holy Emperor would become heavily injured if he took on the 3 moves. He would have to use a Heaven Tier battle skill to block them. There were differences in strength between Saint Tier battle skills as well. The Tyrant's Way of the Sword contained a total of 3 moves, and each of the 3 moves was stronger than the last. As a result, the Tyrant's Way of the Sword had already reached a high level among Saint Tier battle skills. Tsar Kayun was extremely talented. She had already comprehended the mysteries of the Tyrant's Way of the Sword to the limit, and she was able to use it with great proficiency. She was able to perfectly combine her strength as a peak 8th heavenly layer Holy Emperor with the Tyrant's Way of the Sword, unleashing its full potential. Genshin became extremely stern. He had been locked onto by the tremendous pressure from the Saint Tier battle skill, making him feel like he was in a swamp. It was extremely difficult for him to move. At the same time, the Saint artifact had been knocked away as well. Although it rapidly flew toward him under his control, it was nowhere near as fast as the Saint Tier battle skill. Looks like I can only use the Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands, Genshin thought. The Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands was damaged, but Tsar Kayun's Saint Tier battle skill was only as powerful as a casual strike from a Holy Emperor. It was nowhere near as powerful as a punch from King. The damaged Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands was more than enough to block it. Just as Genshin was about to take out the Divine Hall of the 8 Wastelands, a figure suddenly flashed in front of him. Ruijin had silently appeared before Genshin. The sacred dragon's sword in his hand radiated with a terrifying might. Strands of origin energy slowly pulsed, giving off a profound aura. Ruijin's body was like an impenetrable wall in front of Genshin. As he swung the sacred dragon sword, an extremely powerful sword chi shot towards Zar Kayun. The huge sword chi condensed from the second move of Zar Kayun's way of the sword collided with the sword chi from the sacred dragon's sword. With a deafening boom, the huge sword chi condensed from the sword of the void was actually as fragile as tofu. It dispersed without any effort at all. Ruijin's sacred dragon's sword contained origin energy, so the sword chi he shot out from the sacred dragon's sword contained a sliver of origin energy as well. It was a great power that surpassed the Holy Emperor's, belonging to a completely different level of power. Its strength was unquestionable. It could not be compared to the power of this world. The sacred dragon's sword of the void tore through the sword of the void like a hot knife through butter. Without slowing down at all, it continued towards Zar Kayun's third Saint Tier battle skill. Zar Kayun's face suddenly changed when she sensed the power of Ruijin's attack. She extended a finger, and immediately the sword chi changed their trajectory. They immediately lined up in a straight line and shot towards Ruijin's strand of sword chi that contained the origin of the sword chi. A series of explosions rang out. The sword chi that carried the origin was like a ferocious beast, charging forward with an unstoppable momentum. Along the way, the sword chi that came into contact with it exploded one after another, turning into surging origin chi that dissipated in the world. Ruijin only released a single ray of sword chi with the sacred dragon sword. In the end, it pierced through Zar Kayun's chest and disappeared into the horizon. Zar Kayun's body trembled violently as a pained expression appeared on her face. Shortly after, the aura emanating from her body began to fade rapidly as she fell from the sky like a kite with a broken string. Kayun! A cry rang out from the distance. Hao Wu's body merged with the space around him. He turned into a faint blur as he rushed over with lightning speed. He held Zar Kayun firmly in his arms and tried to flee into the distance. Leave this person behind. Jianchen did not recognize Hao Wu. Seeing that someone wanted to save Zar Kayun, he immediately bellowed out and used the illusory flash. He arrived before Hao Wu in a single moment and stabbed his emperor armament at Zar Kayun mercilessly as a black streak of light. A sword that was 3 fingers wide immediately appeared in Hao Wu's hand. It shone with a dense yellow light as it stabbed out with lightning speed. The Holy Emperor, the 8th heavenly layer! Jianchen sensed Hao Wu's strength as soon as he struck out. He had actually reached the 8th heavenly layer, just like Zar Kayun, except he had not reached the peak. He was slightly weaker than Zar Kayun. Just when Hao Wu's sword was about to collide with the Emperor armament, the space 1,000 meters away began to violently distort. Vaguely, the distorted ripples seemed to form a huge zither that was 1,000 meters long. The 36 strings on it were clearly visible. Ding! The strings began to slowly vibrate as a gentle hum rang out. Transparent, musical notes that seemed to have been formed from space rang out from the strings, colliding with Jianchen's Emperor armament and Hao Wu's Saint armament at an unbelievable speed. Clang! When the musical notes collided with the Emperor armament and Hao Wu's Saint armament, they actually erupted with an extremely powerful sound wave. It was enough to shake a person's soul, deafening them. The Saint rulers, watching from afar, even blanked out from the terrifying sound wave, as if they had lost their souls. Jianchen and Hao Wu's sword-wielding hands both trembled. Their swords were knocked to the side while the powerful force almost knocked Jianchen's Emperor armament out of his hand. At the same time, the terrifying sound wave turned into an invisible force that was so powerful that it could not be resisted. It pushed away Jianchen and Hao Wu, stopping their battle. Just a single note was enough to nullify the attacks of 2 supreme experts. The power of the note had far exceeded everyone's expectations. Jianchen and Hao Wu stopped fighting. They turned their heads toward the zither that was slowly dispersing in the air as disbelief filled their eyes. "It's the heavenly enchantress," Jianchen murmured as his heart churned. He recognized the zither. It was the heavenly enchantress zither of the demonic cry. It had the same shape, the same 36 strings, and the same sound. Aside from the heavenly enchantress, there was no one else in the world who could play the zither like that. However, he had never thought that the heavenly enchantress strength would reach such an unbelievable level in just a few years. This greatly shocked Jianqin. Hao Wu hovered in the air with Czar Kaiyun in his arms. He stared at the zither in a daze as his expression became extremely mixed. There was uncontainable pain in his eyes. Muur, is that you? Hao Wu gently called out. His voice trembled and was filled with excitement. It rang out in a radius of several dozen kilometers. Mua! Jianqin immediately became surprised when he heard Hao Wu's name. He thought, does he know the heavenly enchantress? Mua, is that the heavenly enchantress' name? The zither in the air finally completely dispersed. The heavenly enchantress still did not appear. No one knew where she was. Was she hiding somewhere? Or had she left long ago? Tears rolled down Hao Wu's cheeks. He stared at where the zither had vanished with a pained gaze. He said sorrowfully, since you've come, why don't you come and see me? Are you still unwilling to forgive me after all this time? Father, Jianqin was shocked when he heard that. He suddenly turned his head and stared at Hao Wu. His face was filled with shock. At that moment, he even doubted whether he had heard wrong. This middle-aged man is the heavenly enchantress' father? Jianqin was filled with disbelief. He remained in a daze for quite some time. However, that also explained why the heavenly enchantress had secretly interfered with their battle. Ruijin, Blackfish, and Honglian also stared at the zither sternly. They remained silent for quite some time. This girl has become so powerful. She can actually come and go without a trace. I can't even sense her existence anymore. Blackfish sighed in amazement after quite some time. When we met her on Dragon Island several years ago, she was still a saint ruler. How has she become so powerful now? Was she hiding her strength before? If that's really the case, she's just too skilled at hiding her strength, Ruijin murmured. He was completely puzzled. This person is very powerful. That zither note from before actually made my soul tremble. Do you know her? Honglian stared in the direction where the zither had vanished. She was extremely stern. Ruijin nodded. We've met before. She was with Jianqin back then. She used the zither as a weapon to injure her enemies. She walked an extremely rare path. I just never thought that she would actually be so powerful now. Hao Wu. Czar Kaiyun looked at Hao Wu affectionately as she gently called out to him. Her purple dress had been dyed red, making her seem extremely miserable. Hao Wu lowered his head to look at Czar Kaiyun. His face was filled with mixed feelings. Kaiyun, how are you? Are your wounds severe? Hao Wu's voice was filled with concern. Czar Kaiyun gently shook her head. Tears rolled down her cheeks as she spoke in a soft and aggrieved voice. Hao Wu, it's been 3,000 years. It's been 3,000 years. You're finally willing to come out and see me. Do you know that I've waited here for you for 3,000 years? You've made me wait so painfully. Hao Wu closed his eyes in pain. His heart ached as he said, Kaiyun, you're so silly. I'm not worth it. I don't even have the face to see you. I've let you down. I've let you down. Czar Kaiyun gently shook her head and said weakly, Hao Wu, do you know that although you've made me heartbroken in the past, I've never hated you because I know that this was all secretly arranged by the clan. You've only fallen for the scheme of the seniors of the clan and been framed by them. I only hate the seniors of the clan. I only blame the seniors of the clan. I've never blamed you. Hao Wu, do you know that I've always been waiting for you all these years? I've been waiting for you to apologize to me and beg for my forgiveness. Unfortunately, my wish never came true. I've always waited bitterly for you in the clan for 3,000 years, but you're not even willing to see me. Chapter 1035. The true feelings that Czar Kaiyun had hidden within her heart for a very long time finally erupted without holding back at all. The bone-deep tenderness and her unchanging infatuation deeply impacted Hao Wu's heart, causing it to tremble uncontrollably. "Kaiyun, I'm ashamed to see you. I'm ashamed to see you. I've let you down. I've let you down." Hao Wu's face was filled with sorrow as he painfully spoke with his eyes closed. Blood constantly flowed from the corner of Czar Sayun's mouth. She slowly raised her jade-white hand and gently touched Hao Wu's resolute face. Her eyes were no longer as cold and emotionless as before. They had been replaced by gentleness. She said softly, "Hao Wu, I don't blame you. I really have never blamed you, nor have I been angry at you, because back then you were powerless before the clan. Even I couldn't break free from the fate of the clan. But it's different now. We both possess great strength now. We have the right to speak before the clan. We have the right to make decisions. Hao Wu, do you know that I've been thinking about you all these years? I've always wanted to be with you. We can travel to the ends of the world and live our free lives. Now, are you still willing to be with me?" Czar Kaiyun stared at Hao Wu in a daze. She was filled with eagerness. At that moment, the sky became extraordinarily quiet, other than the whistling wind. Only Hao Wu and Czar Sayun's voices could be heard. The saint rulers of the 8 clans all flew over from afar. They stopped in the distance and silently watched what was happening. All of their expressions became extremely mixed, and quite a few of them looked at Czar Kaiyun obediently. Very few of them knew about Czar Sayun's past. They all found it extremely unbelievable that the strongest ancestor of the Czar family, Czar Kaiyun, was so devoted to Hao Wu that she had not changed her mind even after several thousand years. None of them had thought that a story like this would be hidden under Czar Sayun's cold appearance. Czar Sayun's great-grandfather stood with the saint rulers of the Czar family. He also stared at Czar Kaiyun and Hao Wu with extremely mixed feelings. There was also deep regret. That year, he was the one who had ignored Czar Sayun's pleas and forced Czar Kaiyun and Hao Wu to separate. This was because Hao was only a talented mercenary back then. He did not have a fixed residence and was roaming the Tianyuan continent. He did not have any background. So why would someone like him be valued by the Czar family, one of the 7 great capital cities of the continent? As for Czar Kaiyun, she was the most outstanding person in the Czar family. Her talent was extraordinary. She was intelligent and quick-witted. Moreover, her appearance was even more outstanding. She was regarded as the apple of the Czar family's old ancestors' eye and was extremely doted on. How could the Czar family marry such an outstanding clansman to a homeless mercenary? Thus, a series of events happened later on. However, what the Czar family had never imagined was that the mercenary who was only considered to be talented at that time actually had such great potential. A few thousand years later, he had become one of the few unrivaled experts on the Tianyuan continent, becoming a peak expert that the Czar family had no choice but to pay attention to. However, the Czar family had wronged Hao Wu far too many times in the past. Since the mistakes had already been made, it was very difficult to avoid them. As a result, although Hao Wu had always remained in the Holy Emperor's empire, his relationship with the Czar family was extremely subtle. They seemed to be enemies, but they were not enemies. At the same time, Czar Timur knew that with Hao Wu's connections, he already possessed the ability to take revenge on the Czar family many years ago. However, he had never done so. All of this was because of Czar Kaiyun. Jianqin had already put away his emperor armament. He hovered in the air like an ordinary person as he silently stared at Hao Wu and Czar Kaiyun with a complicated gaze. The light in his eyes flickered. No one knew what he was thinking. Ruijin, Honglian, Blackfish, and the 4 protectors of the Bloodsword sect were all speechless. They stood with Jianqin. Hao Wu painfully closed his eyes when he heard Czar Sayun's words. He did not reply for quite a while. Czar Kaiyun stared at Hao Wu for a long time. In the end, disappointment appeared on her face. Tears rolled down her cheeks uncontrollably. How Wu, I know you still love me. You've always loved me, right? How Wu gently nodded. He said nothing. The main reason why you don't want to be with me is because of your daughter. You're afraid that your daughter will never forgive you, right? Tsar Tsayun's voice was filled with pain. I'm sorry, Kayun. How Wu gently stroked Tsar Tsayun's face. His heart was filled with pain as well. He had clearly always loved Tsar Kayun, but due to certain reasons he could not be with her. He had not even seen her once in 3,000 years. Tsar Kayun smiled. She slowly closed her eyes in satisfaction and gently said, How Wu, although I can't be with you, I'm already very satisfied to be in your embrace again. With that, Tsar Kayun suddenly trembled violently. A large mouthful of blood immediately sprayed out of her mouth as she became even paler. She was on the verge of death. How Wu's expression drastically changed. He immediately opened his eyes and stared at Tsar Kayun in disbelief. Kayun, Kayun, what are you doing? You actually severed your own meridian. How can you be so stupid? Since living means suffering, I might as well die. It's better than being tormented every day. How Wu, I hope we can meet again in the next life. Tsar Tsayun's face was ashen. She wanted to die now. She no longer had any desire to live. Afterwards, a faint wisp of weakness appeared on Tsar Tsayun's head. She was using a secret technique to burn her soul. Kayun, don't do anything stupid. How Wu paled in fright. It was just too sudden. He was at a loss for what to do. Kayun, stop. Tsar Fimor's expression drastically changed as well. He hurriedly called out, Ancestor. The saint rulers of the Tsar family were all shocked as well. They all cried out sorrowfully. Genshin's expression changed slightly as well. He immediately turned to Ruijin and said, Senior Ruijin, please stop her. Ruijin nodded slightly. He silently arrived before Tsar Kayun and directly sent a palm strike toward her head. Don't hurt Kayun. How Wu thought that Ruijin wanted to kill Kayun, so he bellowed out. He immediately moved to block Ruijin's palm strike. If you don't want her soul to be destroyed, don't interfere, Genshin growled. He formed a seal with his left hand and immediately used a secret technique of the Dragon Clan to imprison How Wu. At the same time, his right hand struck Tsar Tsayun's head mercilessly. The flames on Tsar Tsayun's head immediately dispersed. Her soul had stopped burning. Ruijin had forcefully interrupted her suicidal actions. However, her soul was extremely injured, so she fainted. How Wu recovered his freedom very quickly. He quickly retreated with Tsar Kayun, pulling away from Ruijin. He stared at Tsar Kayun in worry as he constantly shook her. Kayun, how are you? How are you? Tsar Fimor arrived before How Wu as well. He was filled with sorrow as he stared at the unconscious Kayun in pain. He regretted his decision back then. Chapter 1036. Kayun, you're so stupid. You're really stupid. Why did you do that? Why did you do that? How Wu was in great pain. He constantly stroked Tsar Tsayun's pale face with his rough hand as he felt extremely pained inside. Tears streamed down Tsar's face as well. He felt terrible seeing his great-granddaughter in so much pain because he was the one who had caused all of this. And it was exactly because of what had happened back then that his relationship with Tsar Kayun had never been good. Sigh, I really regret it. I really regret it. Tsar Tsayun's current state would have an extremely serious impact on the strength of the Tsar family. Kayun, wake up. Wake up. I'll take you home. Let's go back to our home and live like before. How Wu gently murmured. How Wu murmured softly. He wanted to wake Tsar Kayun up, but Tsar Tsayun's closed eyes did not move. It was as if she did not hear him at all. How Wu, give Kayun to me. Our Tsar family will do everything we can to save her, Tsar Kayun said to How Wu. A sliver of viciousness immediately appeared in How Wu's sorrowful eyes when he heard that. He glared at Tsar Kayun resentfully and said coldly, "Czar Kayun, think about what you did back then. Do you still have the face to ask for Kayun back for me? You no longer have the right. Czar Kayun, if it weren't for Kayun, do you think the Czar family would still be as carefree as it is now?" Hao Wu's words were like a bucket of cold water that had been poured over Czar Kayun. Czar Tsayun's entire body turned cold. He stood there blankly, as his soul seemed to have left his body. Hao Wu then looked at Jianchen. He quickly glanced at Ruijin and Black Fish from the corner of his eyes. A sliver of intense fear appeared in the depths of his eyes. He said, "Jianchen, Kayun is no longer a member of the Czar family, and she's in such a miserable state now. I hope we can forget about the enmity between you and Kayun, and the matters of the Czar family have nothing to do with us. What do you think?" Jianchen's expression became extremely mixed. He slowly nodded and said, "Senior Hao Wu, I want to ask you a question. What's your relationship with the heavenly enchantress?" Although Jianchen had already guessed that Hao Wu was the heavenly enchantress' father, he still wanted to confirm it. Hao Wu's face immediately darkened when he heard that. He said in low spirits, "She's my daughter, but she has always refused to acknowledge me as her father." Hao Wu's face became filled with pain when he mentioned the heavenly enchantress. He felt like his heart was being twisted. Although he already knew this would happen, Jianchen still sighed when he heard Hao Wu personally admit it. Jianchen calmed himself down and slowly flew over to Hao Wu's side. He stared at Czar Kayun with mixed feelings. After hesitating slightly, he slowly closed his eyes. Immediately, an extremely dense, milky white light radiated from Jianchen. It enveloped his entire body, obscuring him. Jianchen seemed like a god who had brought light to the world as he bathed in the milky white light. His face was filled with a divine sense of dignity, making him seem inviolable. This is the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. I never thought that he would have already become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. The President and Grand Elder both cried out when they saw this. Their faces were filled with shock. Although the Saint artifact of the Union had been taken away by Jianchen, it was not easy for a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master to reach the 7th class. However, Jianchen had become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master at such a young age. This was definitely unprecedented on the Tianyuan continent. He really is a genius, but it's just a pity. The President sighed as he shook his head. His face was filled with regret. Jianchen had personally used the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force to heal Czar Kayun. From his actions, it was possible to tell what kind of choice he had made regarding the matter of Czar Kayun. Although Jianchen and the Heavenly Enchantress were not husband and wife, they were actually husband and wife. The Heavenly Enchantress was Hao Wu's daughter, while Czar Kayun and Hao Wu were deeply in love with each other. Their deep love had even moved Jianchen. Although Jianchen had no idea what had happened between the three of them that led to such a complicated situation, Jianchen understood what kind of choice he had to make based on their relationship on the surface. If he continued to kill Czar Kayun, Hao would definitely fight to the death, and their relationship would become hostile again. This was not something that Jianchen wished to see. At the same time, the Heavenly Enchantress had hidden in the shadows to stop him from fighting Hao Wu earlier. Perhaps even the Heavenly Enchantress was unwilling to see him engage in a battle to the death with her father. Although Jianchen had learnt from Hao Wu that the Heavenly Enchantress had never acknowledged him as her father, they were still father and daughter after all. Czar Tsayun's wounds were only slightly worse than the one left behind by Ruijin's sacred dragon sword. The powerful origin energy had created a fist-sized hole in her flesh, but Radiant Saint Force origin energy possessed the power of regeneration. Jianchen had only used a strand of Radiant Saint Force origin energy to heal Czar Tsayun's wounds. But Czar Kayun did not wake up. Hao Wu was extremely grateful for Jianchen's actions. He constantly thanked him. He understood Jianchen's background extremely well. He knew that Jianqin was a figure that even the 10 protector clans could not do anything to. Even the Holy Emperor of the humans and the Holy Emperor of the magical beasts could only retreat helplessly with 2 supreme experts following him. However, even now, Hao still had no idea about the relationship between Jianqin and his daughter. I have already used Radiant Saint Force to heal her wounds, but I can't do anything about the wounds to her soul, Jianqin gently sighed. I will find a way to deal with the wounds to her soul. I've let her down. I'm the one who caused her to become like this. I will use the rest of my life to make it up to her. Hao Wu stared at Kai Yun's beautiful face before leaving with her in his arms. He vanished into the horizon very soon. Kai Yun! Zarfimor sorrowfully called out. He stared blankly in the direction Kai Yun had disappeared in. His eyes were filled with reluctance and worry. At this moment, more and more saint rulers hurried over from all directions. They all watched from afar. They had all been drawn over by the battle earlier. Jianqin casually glanced at the empty space in front of him. His soul had become extremely powerful, so he could clearly sense the Holy Emperor's experts hiding there. The ancestor of the Kara clan was among them. After what happened to Hao Wu, Jianqin wasn't in the mood to continue dealing with the enmity between the 8 great clans of the City of God and the Czar clan. He coldly said to the people of the 8 great clans, "For the sake of Senior Hao Wu, I don't want to pursue the matter of you injuring me back then. You can avoid death, but you can't escape punishment." The saint rulers of the 8 clans all let out a sigh of relief when they heard that. They all seemed like they had just survived a disaster. The thing they feared the most was that Jianqin would seek revenge for what had happened in the past. If that happened, they would be powerless to stop him. Jianqin, our Chung clan deeply regrets offending you in the past. In order to thank Jianqin for sparing our lives, I will now pay the price of self-destruction as an explanation to little brother Jianqin. The saint ruler of the Chung clan was the first to speak. He then directly punched himself in the chest, causing blood to spray into the air. He was already heavily injured. Afterward, the other saint rulers of the 8 clans all self-destructed, heavily injuring themselves to pay the price for what they had done in the past. At the same time, they wanted to give Jianqin an explanation and thank Jianqin for sparing their lives. This scene immediately caused a burst of discussion among the crowd of onlookers. They were whispering to each other about something. The grievances between Jianqin and the 8 clans of the City of God had been completely resolved. Although Jianqin's plans had been disrupted by Jianqin and Czar Kaiyan in the end, it was still a perfect resolution. Chapter 1037. The President and Grand Elder both sighed inside as they stared at the person who had once been the most outstanding genius of the Radiant Saint Master Union. They were filled with mixed feelings. In the past, the 2 of them had treated Jianqin as the future of the Union. The President had even groomed him as his personal assistant, going as far as to use his own disciple to train Jianqin. They all hoped that Jianqin could grow quickly and become a great figure who could take on the responsibility of developing the Union. Unfortunately, the heavens had played a huge joke on them. Yang Yutian, who had joined the Union as a Radiant Saint Master, was actually a fighter as well. He was a hermit who had reached Saint Ruler. Since ancient times, Radiant Saint Masters and fighters had never appeared on the same person. As a result, it was said that fighters and Radiant Saint Masters could not exist on the Tianyuan continent at the same time. After all these years, no one had ever broken through this limit. However, the exposure of Yang Yutian's identity as a fighter had broken this restriction that had existed for countless years on the Tianyuan continent. This affected the Radiant Saint Master Union so greatly that it basically caused an earthquake. Aside from that, Jianqin's other identity shocked all the upper echelon of the Union. He was actually a direct descendant of the Protector clan of the Chanyang Prefecture. The Protector clans were the ultimate power on the Tianyuan continent. They had existed since ancient times, and their history was even longer than mercenary cities. Even the 3 empires were unable to fend them off. They were the undisputed hegemons of the Tian-Yuan continent. Compared to them, the Radiant Saint Master Union was as weak as a 3-year-old child. They could not even withstand a single blow. The president and Grand Elder looked at Jianqin with extremely mixed feelings. The two of them did not say anything for quite some time. Their gazes were filled with love and hatred. In their eyes, Jianqin was a person they both loved and hated. They loved his talent and the bright future he could bring to the Union, but they hated Jianqin's multiple identities and the harm he had brought to the Union by taking away the saint artifact in the past. They knew that Yang Yutian, the most outstanding genius in the history of the Union, who was extremely likely to become a Class 8 Radiant Saint Master in the future, would probably never return. Sigh. After quite a while, the Grand Elder sighed at the sky. Jianqin, you finally returned to the Tianyuan continent. I never thought that your strength would increase by so much in just a few years. It's unbelievable. Jianqin, if you have the time, come to our union's headquarters and have a seat. There are some things I want to discuss with you, the president said as well. Jianqin knew that the president wanted to talk about the saint artifact, so he did not turn him down. He nodded. President, once I deal with the matters here, I'll come to the union with you. The president of the Radiant Saint Master Union smiled happily and nodded. Jianqin used the illusory flash to leave. It was like he was walking through empty space. With each step, he could cross several kilometers as if he had teleported. Although Jianqin did not purposefully study the illusory flash, he had become more and more familiar with it after using it so many times. Now, Jianqin's grasp over the illusory flash was increasing. With over 10 steps, Jianqin crossed over 100 kilometers and returned to the City of God. The huge barrier around the city had already disappeared, revealing the city's original appearance. Ruijin, Blackfish, Honglian, and the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect followed behind Jianqin. Behind them were Zophomore and the saint rulers of the 8 great clans, as well as many other experts who had come to watch the show. Jianqin stepped into the sky and directly went to the Zophomore family's mansion. He saw that Bijui Wang was still there, standing in the same position with a face filled with worry. Previously, Bibi Wang had been imprisoned by Czar Kaiyun, so he couldn't move his hands and feet. Although Czar Kaiyun had snatched him away, she hadn't removed the imprisonment power that Czar Kaiyun had placed on him. Thus, the immobile Bibi Wang could only obediently stay there, unable to escape even if he wanted to. Bijui Wang, I'd like to see who can save you now. Jianqin coldly stared at Bijui Wang. He did not hide his powerful killing intent at all, causing the temperature in the surroundings to plummet. Bijui Wang's expression immediately changed when he saw that Jianqin had actually returned safely. He was utterly terrified and his face was filled with dread. Don't kill me, don't kill me. Jianqin, I'm a good friend of the Heavenly Enchantress. If you kill me, the Heavenly Enchantress will never forgive you. She'll hate you for the rest of her life, Bijui Wang said with a trembling voice. The parallel-shouldered king said in a trembling voice. His face was already pale. He knew that he had reached the moment of life and death. Bijui Wang, if it weren't for the timely arrival of the experts from Changyang Prefecture, my good friends probably would have died at your hands. I've also heard that you're interested in my fiancée Yu, right? Jianqin's gaze became colder and colder as his heart began to boil with killing intent. No, that's not it, Jianqin, this is a misunderstanding. Beside the Shoulder King hurriedly tried to explain himself, trying to absolve himself of the blame. Jianqin remained unmoved. He coldly said, Don't worry, Bijui Wang. I won't kill you so easily. With that, Jianqin kicked Bijui Wang's dantian viciously. Immediately, chaotic force entered Bijui Wang's dantian and destroyed his saint weapon. His dantian was completely shattered and the powerful force had even pulverized his organs. Bijui Wang produced an extremely miserable shriek. He was heavily injured with his saint weapon destroyed. Although he could survive as long as his soul remained intact as a saint ruler, his strength had been greatly reduced. Afterward, Jianqin extended a finger and a strand of chaotic force stabbed into Bijui Wang's forehead as a sharp sword qi. It heavily injured Bijui Wang's soul and prevented him from escaping by projecting his soul. With his soul injured, Bijui Wang immediately became dispirited and on the verge of death. He didn't even have the strength to scream. The intense pain caused his forehead to be covered with fine beads of sweat. "Jianqin, you'll die a horrible death." Bijui Wang cursed through gritted teeth, but his voice was weak. With his saint weapon destroyed and his soul injured, he knew he was done for. Jianqin completely ignored Bijui Wang's curses. There was no need to be angry with a person who was about to die. He then stored Bijui Wang in the artifact space and left the Tsar family. On the highest floor of the Union, Jianqin, the president and grand elder of the Union, were chatting in a splendidly decorated hall. After their conversation, Jianqin gained a clear understanding of the Union's current situation. The loss of the Union's saint weapon had indeed caused a huge uproar among the upper echelons of the Union. It had almost caused the Union to collapse. In the end, it was all thanks to the secret assistance of the three great clans of the Holy Emperor's empire that the Union was able to avert the disaster. This was because the Union was not a weak force. As long as it was in the Holy Emperor's empire, it was a force that belonged to the Holy Emperor's empire. Therefore, the three great clans that controlled the Holy Emperor's empire were unwilling to see the Union disband. As a result, some of the Union's experts had sided with other organizations or the other two empires, increasing the strength of others. The Radiant Saint Master Union and the three great clans of the Holy Emperor's empire had issued a gag order on the loss of the saint weapon. They had also found an excuse to announce the loss of the saint weapon. From the president and grand elder, Jianqin also learned that among the top 10 in the last competition, other than himself, the other 9 failed to become a Class 7 Radiant Saint Master. This included Kara Libby, who was publicly acknowledged as the strongest Class 6 Radiant Saint Master. All of them had failed to fuse with the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. Jianqin, although our Union has lost the saint weapon, as long as the origin energy we control is not severed, our Union will be able to survive for a long time. According to your request, we have been searching for items that can store the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. We have already collected quite a lot and have placed them all in this space ring. I hope that the next time the seal on the saint weapon is broken, Jianqin, you can help us collect more of the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force. The president's voice was filled with pleading. He knew that the lifeline of the Radiant Saint Masters was completely in Jianqin's hands. If the Union lost the origin energy of Radiant Saint Force, how would they be able to gather all the powerful Radiant Saint Masters on the continent? Jianqin accepted the space ring and said, "President, don't worry. When the seal on the saint weapon is broken next time, I will definitely store up enough origin energy for you. Then we don't have to worry anymore." The president and the great elder heaved a sigh of relief. Their hearts, which had been in their throats, finally settled down, and they felt much more at ease. Jianqin sat in his chair and thought for a while. Reminiscence filled his eyes. The scenes of him roaming the city of God as a Class 6 Radiant Saint Master appeared in his head once again. At that moment, he thought about Yang Ling, who did not even care about his own life and only wanted to protect him, as well as Quan Yukai, who clung to him all the time in an attempt to obtain radiant arts. Yang Ling's loyalty had once touched Jianqin deeply. Although he was only a guard, Jianqin had never treated him as an outsider during that period of time. Instead, he treated him as a friend, even though he was only a Heaven Saint Master. "President, Grand Elder, may I ask if my past personal guard, Yang Ling, is present?" "I would like to see him," Jianqin said. Chapter 1038. Jianqin sighed inside when he heard that. He never thought that after so many years, Quan Yukai and Yang Ling would end up together. Quan Yukai is so thick-skinned, Sometimes he gives off the feeling of a scoundrel. You can't chase him away no matter how hard you try. Yang Ling, on the other hand, is quiet and honest. It's quite interesting for the two of them to end up together, Jianchen thought. Very soon, the tall and burly Yang Ling was brought over. Along with him was the white-robed Kuan Yu Kai with an exquisite blue badge on his chest. Oh my, brother Yang Yutian, it really is you. I heard from the elders that you've come back to seek revenge on the 8 great clans. I didn't believe it at first, but now that I've met you, it really is you. Kuan Yotsai's eyes immediately lit up when he saw Jianchen. He was overjoyed. Afterwards, he acted as if he didn't see the president and grand elder sitting to the side. He strode over to Jianchen's side and circled around him. He studied Jianchen and asked in disbelief, Brother Yang Yutian, were the elders telling the truth? Did you really come back to seek revenge on the 8 great clans? Also, there was an intense battle in the sky above the city of God. Was that caused by you? The president frowned when he saw how Kuan Yu Kai was behaving. He growled, Kuan Yu Kai, don't be so rude to Brother Jianchen. Ah, teacher, Grand Elder, the two of you are here as well. Kuan Yu Kai greets teacher and Grand Elder. Kuan Yu Kai seemed to have only just noticed the existence of the president and Grand Elder. He immediately put away his frivolous expression and bowed to the two of them politely. After Kuan Yu Kai failed to fuse with Radiant Saint Force, he had been accepted as a disciple by the president. However, his status was not like Jianchen and Yun Tian, who were direct disciples of the Union. The relationship between Kuan Yu Kai and the president was like that between a teacher and a student. Kuan Yu Kai was extremely respectful towards the president and Grand Elder. Before the two of them, he immediately behaved himself. He stood to the side obediently, not daring to say anything. His eyes constantly glanced at Jianchen. He wanted to say something, but he was afraid of the president and Grand Elder, so he didn't say anything. Seeing his old friends, Jianchen's mood became much better. Although he and Kuan Yu Kai and Yang Ling could not be considered as close friends, the two of them had once been by his side. Kuan Yu Kai, let's catch up later, Jianchen said to Kuan Yu Kai, who was standing there obediently with a smile on his face. Kuan Yu Kai firmly nodded his head. He did not say anything else, but his eyes slyly glanced at the president and Grand Elder. Jianchen looked at Yang Ling and carefully observed him. Although they had been separated for 10 years, Yang Ling had not changed at all. He was the same as before. Yang Ling, it's been a few years since we last met. How have you been? Jianchen smiled faintly. Yang Ling looked at Jianchen with a complicated gaze. However, he still respectfully cupped his hands towards Jianchen and said, Yang Ling greets the esteemed Master Yang Yutian. Many thanks for Master Yang Yutian's concern. Yang Ling has been well all these years. Yang Ling, you can just call me Jianchen. Jianchen is my real name, Jianchen said. Yes, Master Jianchen. Yang Ling cupped his hands respectfully. His expression was still as respectful as before. Jianchen leaned back on the soft chair and stared at Yang Ling with shining eyes. He calmly said, Yang Ling, have you ever hated me? Jianchen regarded Yang Ling with great importance. Yang Ling's position in Jianchen's heart far exceeded that of Kuan Yu Kai. It had even exceeded some of his ordinary friends. Back on the boat on the Fragrance River, Jianchen had been assassinated by the experts of the 8 great clans. Yang Ling had risked his life to protect Jianchen and escape. That scene had deeply touched Jianchen's heart. Yang Ling wouldn't dare. Yang Ling had completely treated himself as a servant. He did not have the pride of a 6th cycle Heaven Saint Master at all. He behaved respectfully. Yang Ling, do you still remember the promise I made to you back then? Back then, I said that if there was a chance in the future, I would find a way to help you. Now I'll fulfill my promise. I wonder if you're willing to come with me. I'll let you become a saint ruler, Jianchen swore. He was completely confident that he could let Yang Ling become a saint ruler. Yang Ling's eyes immediately lit up when he heard the words become a saint. He became wild with joy, but soon after his eyes dimmed. He glanced at the president of the Bright Saint Master Guild. The president chuckled. Yang Ling, being able to follow by little brother Jianshan's side is the greatest fortune of your life. Why don't you hurry up and thank little brother Jianshan? I believe that with little brother Jianshan's guidance, you'll definitely soar in the future and become a supreme expert. Yang Ling felt like he had been pardoned from the president's words. He became overjoyed and clasped his hands at Jianshan politely. Thank you for your kindness, Master Jianshan. Little brother Jianshan, we'll leave Yang Ling to you. In the future, he's yours. Our union won't interfere with any of Yang Ling's matters anymore. The president expressed his stance to Jianshan again. With Jianshan's current strength and status, the union would have no choice but to obey if he wanted to take someone away from their union. They would not dare to disobey. At this moment, an elder of the union with a purple badge on his chest walked in with an embroidered box in his hand. He directly arrived beside the president and said, "President, I've already taken out what you wanted from the treasury." The president took the brocade box from the elder's hand and slowly opened it. 3 fist-sized white stones were quietly lying inside. The stones were square in shape and were sparkling and translucent. They looked like top-grade jade stones. Little brother Jianshan, we call these 3 rocks flaming jadeite. They're extremely rare rocks on the Tianyuan continent and are extremely difficult to find. Every single one of them is priceless and extremely difficult to purchase on the market. The flaming jadeite is a type of rock that can store energy. Depending on the quality of the rock, it can store different amounts of energy. If a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler stores energy into the rock will be able to unleash an attack from a 9th heavenly layer saint ruler, even in the hands of an ordinary person. If a holy emperor stores energy into the rock will be able to unleash an attack from a holy emperor. The 3 flaming jadeites in my hands are of the highest quality. They can store the power of a great perfection expert, like the holy emperor. Since little brother Jianshan has a family, I'll give these 3 rocks to little brother Jianshan. I hope they'll be of some help to little brother Jianshan. The president walked over to Jianshan with the box and passed it to him. Hearing the president's introduction, Jianshan could not help but think back to the time when he had participated in the elimination round of the Radiant Saint Master Union in the artifact space. A Class 6 Radiant Saint Master from the Tsar family had brought a mysterious stone from the outside world that could unleash the power of a Saint King. Now, it seemed like the rock that contained the power of the Holy Emperor was the flaming jadeite that the president had introduced. Thank you for such a great gift, President. Jianshan did not refuse. He accepted the 3 rocks excitedly. The 3 rocks could store the power of the Holy Emperor at great perfection. In other words, if a Holy Emperor at great perfection were to store his power in the rocks, they would be able to unleash an attack of the Holy Emperor at great perfection in the hands of an ordinary person. They were basically treasures to Jianshan. Jianshan stayed in the Union for an entire day. During that time, he chatted a lot with the president and Grand Elder. He also mentioned Yun Tian. However, Jianshan learned from the president that Yun Tian had gone missing. Even when they used a secret technique to search the entire continent, they failed to find any traces of Yun Tian. When Jianshan emerged from the Union, it was already dark outside. The curtain of darkness had descended, enveloping the entire sky. The entire land was enveloped in darkness. Brother Jianshan, it's been 10 years since we last met. I don't know when we'll meet again. Tonight, I, Quan Yukai, will be your host. I'd like to invite you to the most famous pleasure boat on the Fragrance River for a night of sightseeing. I wonder if you'll do me the honor. Quan Yukai recovered his usual cheerful demeanor as soon as he left the Union. He laughed at Jianshan. Jianshan did not turn down Quan Yotsai's suggestion. Afterward, he boarded a carriage with the silent Yang Ling and directly made their way to the Fragrance River outside the city. Blackfish and Honglian followed them. Rui Jin had already entered the artifact space with the flaming jadeite Jianqin had obtained from the president of the Union. He was channeling energy into the flaming jadeite, while the 4 protectors of the Blood Sword sect had been sent away by Jianqin as well. Jianqin could not help but close his eyes as he sat in the bumpy carriage. At that moment, he calmed down for once. Right now, he felt like he had returned to the past. He had become the esteemed Class 6, Radiant Saint Master once more. Quan Yukai had really invested a lot tonight. He had reserved the most famous pleasure boat on the Fragrance River, spending several 100,000 purple coins. However, several 100,000 purple coins was nothing to a Class 6, Radiant Saint Master. The pleasure boat traveled through the night as the faint sound of a zither rang out, drifting on the surface of the river. The 2 banks of the river were brightly lit and bustling with activity. Every night, this would be the busiest place. It was where all the rich and noble gathered. On the deck, Jianqin, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling drank to their heart's content as they chatted. The white tiger, who had shrunk to the size of a cat, emerged from the artifact space as well. It sat on a table filled with delicacies as it ate with relish. Yu remained in the artifact space, using the many low-class magical beasts to increase her strength. The artifact spirit was secretly protecting her, so Jianqin was not worried about her life at all. Blackfish and Honglian had followed Jianqin the entire time. However, they were not interested in participating in such an occasion due to their age. They sat at the end of the boat with their eyes closed. A white streak of light shot through the night sky, directly flying toward Jianqin's boat before slowly landing on the deck. Jianqin, Quan Yukai, and Yang Ling all stared at the uninvited figure. It was a woman in a white dress. She seemed to be in her 20s and possessed an alluring beauty. Yang Yutian, you finally appeared after disappearing for 10 years. The woman smiled brightly as she slowly made her way toward Jianqin. I never thought it would be Miss Cara Livy. It's been so many years, but Miss Li Wei is still as graceful as ever. Jianqin smiled at the woman. She was the young lady of the Cara clan, Cara Livy. Chapter 1039. Cara Livy arrived before Jianqin. Light flowed through her eyes as she smiled. In the blink of an eye, 10 years have passed. After 10 years, your bearing has changed drastically. Your identity and strength have completely changed as well. Yang Yutian, 10 years have passed, but I'm still the same person, but you're no longer the same person. A sliver of melancholy appeared in Cara Livy's eyes, as if she was reminiscing about the past. Jianqin smiled when he heard Cara Livy's words. He said, Miss Li Wei sure knows how to joke. It's been 10 years and my identity and strength are no longer the same as before, but I'm still the same person as before. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling drank alone. The 2 of them tacitly excluded Jianqin and stopped talking to Jianqin. However, the 2 of them would glance at Jianqin and Cara Livy from time to time. Really? Cara Livy smiled faintly. She picked up an empty cup from the table with her slender fingers and poured herself a cup of wine. She glanced at Jianqin and said, Since the current Yang Yutian is still the same as before, may I ask if Your Excellency Yang Yutian still remembers Li Wei saving you once in the artifact space? Of course I remember. Back then, I was surrounded in the artifact space. It was all thanks to Miss Li Wei's timely arrival that I had enough time to use Ruling Sword and turn the situation around. Jianqin smiled. May I ask, Your Excellency Yang Yutian, how will you thank Li Wei for saving you all those years ago? Cara Livy's eyes shone with an enchanting light. She smiled faintly as she stared at Jianqin's resolute face. The artifact will be unsealed in 40 years. I will do everything I can to assist Miss Li Wei in breaking through to Class 7. I wonder if Miss Li Wei is satisfied with that, Jianqin said. I hope Your Excellency Yang Yutian will not break your promise and make Li Wei sad, Cara Livy said faintly. She seemed pitiful before raising her cup to Jianqin. Come, Yang Yutian, For the sake of Li Wei becoming a Class 7, Radiant Saint Master in 40 years, Li Wei will toast you. Kara Livy raised her cup to Gentian's lips as she looked at Gentian with a faint smile on her alluring face. Gentian could even smell a faint fragrance from Kara Livy's slender fingers. It was intoxicating. Kara Livy possessed a beauty that could outshine the moon and put flowers to shame. If someone did not have a firm heart, they probably would have lost their mind long ago. Gentian chuckled aloud. He accepted the cup from Kara Livy and drank it all in a single gulp. Yang Yutian, does the wine taste good? Kara Livy suddenly asked as light flowed through her eyes. The wine is expensive, so of course it's good. Gentian subconsciously replied. However, before he could finish, Kara Livy suddenly moved over and kissed Gentian with her cherry-like lips. Gentian was caught off guard. He had never thought that Kara Livy would suddenly do something like this. He immediately became stunned, but by the time he returned to his senses, their lips had already parted. Kara Livy's face had already become red as she slowly backed away with a faint smile. Quan Yukai, who was happily drinking with Yang Ling, suddenly spat out all the wine in his mouth. Coincidentally, all of it sprayed onto Yang Ling's face. His expression became sluggish. Yang Ling used his sleeve to wipe the wine off his face. He looked at Quan Yukai with a puzzled expression and said, "Master Quan Yukai, why did you spray all the wine on my face? It's such a good wine, it's such a pity." "Miss Li Wei." Gentian's face was full of astonishment. He stared blankly at Kara Livy. Kara Livy let out a giggle. Her smile was very charming, and her face became even redder. She said, "Yang Yutian, you must always remember that you owe me, Kara Livy, the most important thing." With that dense, radiant saint force suddenly condensed into a white cloud under Kara Livy's feet. Kara Livy did not stay any longer. She stepped on the white cloud and left the boat, flying towards the shore of the Fragrance River. "Yang Yutian, I'll pass on a message from the ancestor of our Kara clan to you. Our Tsar clan hopes to be on good terms with you forever." Kara Livy's voice rang out in the air. When her voice dissipated, she had already disappeared into the darkness. "Gentian, what are you standing there for? Hurry up and chase her. The cooked duck is about to fly away." Quan Yukai put down his wine cup and anxiously roared at Gentian. He could not wait any longer. Gentian looked in the direction Kara Livy had disappeared. He shook his head with a bitter smile and sighed. "Come, let's continue drinking." "Sigh, what a great opportunity. You missed it just like that. If you had chased after her, everything would have happened naturally." Quan Yotsai's face was filled with regret. Kara Livy's appearance was only a small interlude. Gentian's group of 3 returned to their previous state very soon. They continued to drink and chat. At this moment, Yu stood on a grassland in the artifact space. She was dressed in martial arts attire and wielded a sword dripping with blood. Beside her was a 5-meter-long azure wolf. Its body was covered in sword wounds, and its flesh was in a mess. It was no longer breathing. Sima Yu stood in front of Green Wolf's corpse and wiped the sweat off her forehead. She muttered, "Why do I suddenly feel uneasy?" Sima Yu furrowed her brows and muttered to herself. Then she called out to the void, "Artifact spirit!" "Greetings to the matriarch. May I ask what the matriarch needs?" The artifact spirit appeared beside you out of nowhere. It was extremely respectful, as if it was facing Gentian. "Send me out first." You said to the artifact spirit. "Yes, matriarch." The artifact spirit replied before immediately notifying Gentian. After receiving Gentian's permission, it sent you out. Yu's appearance on the pleasure boat naturally attracted the curiosity of Yang Ling and Quan Yukai. As a result, Gentian introduced Yu to them before continuing to drink with the 2 of them. You went to the cabin and changed into a long white dress. She regained the elegance and quietness of a princess. Then she sat quietly beside Gentian and poured wine for Gentian like a little wife. She rarely spoke. At this moment, Ruijin and Honglian, who were sitting cross-legged at the back of the boat, suddenly opened their eyes and stood up. Their eyes were shining as they stared at the river. "There's something strange at the bottom of the river," Honglian said in a deep voice. Her pupils turned red in an instant, as if there was a ball of fire dancing in her eyes. At this moment, Honglian's eyes seemed to have become fiery eyes that could pierce through the void and see through all illusions. After a moment, Honglian was shocked and exclaimed in a low voice, "How is this possible? There's actually a temple hidden under the river." "What a temple?" Blackfish was also shocked and revealed an expression of disbelief. Honglian nodded. Her fiery red pupils stared closely at the bottom of the drifting fragrance river and said, "The temple was sealed in the depths of the river and concealed all of its aura. Now, the seal has been broken with the corrosion of time. The temple is breaking out of the ground and floating towards the river." Chapter 1040. With the rapid rise of the river, the pleasure boat that Jianqin and the others were on became unstable and began to shake violently. The sudden change startled Jianqin and the others. They immediately stopped drinking. Quan Yotsai's expression changed as well. The drunken haze in his eyes disappeared in an instant, and he became spirited. The boat shook more and more violently, making it difficult for them to stand still. The tables on the deck shook violently, and various delicacies fell to the floor. "What's going on? Why is the boat shaking so violently all of a sudden? Is it going to capsize?" Quan Yukai exclaimed in a low voice. His eyes shone brightly as he looked around in confusion. Yang Ling immediately became alert. His drunkenness had already disappeared. His eyes were like torches as he scanned the surroundings. He was ready to fight at any time. You tightly hugged Gentian's arm. Her expression remained calm, as long as she stayed by Gentian's side, even if the sky fell, there would be someone to hold it up. Gentian slowly put down his wine cup and stood on the deck as if nothing had happened. He released his spiritual sense and quickly extended it into the water. But soon, Gentian's expression changed to one of shock and disbelief. He said to Quan Yukai and Yang Ling, "Hurry up and leave the boat. Also, inform the sailors on the boat to come ashore immediately." With that, Jianqin carried Yu and soared 100 meters into the air. Although Quan Yukai and Yang Ling had no idea what had happened, they obeyed Jianqin's orders. The two of them immediately ran back to the cabin to inform the sailors. Afterwards, they floated into the air and left the boat. Blackfish and Honglian, who were at the back of the boat, also flew 100 meters into the night sky at the same time. They stood together with Jianqin and looked down at the river below. The water level of the Fragrance River was rising more and more violently. The overflowing water had already flooded both sides of the river and was spreading towards the land in the distance. For a moment, the people who were playing on both sides of the river panicked. Some of the stronger people had already used their various abilities and leaped onto the trees beside them. The pleasure boats in the Fragrance River began to slowly tilt and sink to the bottom of the river one by one. The sailors inside had already escaped from their cabins and swam towards the shore in an inexplicable panic. Splash! Suddenly, a huge splash of water burst forth, forming a huge wave that was over 1,000 meters in diameter. Soon after, a completely silvery white shrine flashing with dazzling silver light slowly broke out of the water and rose into the sky with a large splash. It was a magnificent sight. What is this thing? Quan Yukai stared at the silvery white shrine that rose into the sky with a flabbergasted expression. Yang Ling, who was flying beside Quan Yukai, also stared blankly. With their current knowledge, they naturally couldn't recognize the shrine. The silvery white shrine emitted a layer of hazy silver light as it rose into the sky. It was filled with a pure and holy aura, illuminating the pitch-black night sky as if it was daytime. The noisy banks of the Fragrance River immediately fell silent. Everyone stared dumbfoundedly at the shrine that rose into the sky and became smaller and smaller. No one paid any attention to the sudden rise of the river water. The silvery white shrine was 1,000 meters long and several hundred meters tall. It was extremely exquisite and flawless, like a work of art. No one could find any flaws with it at all. The shrine only stopped after reaching an altitude of 10,000 meters. Immediately, a pressure radiated from the shrine, blotting out the sky and expanding in all directions. Before the pressure, the energy of the world became docile. The ancestors of the 8 clans in the City of God, the experts of the Tsar family, and the people of the Radiant Saint Master Union were all roused. When they saw the finger-sized, silver-white, divine hall hovering in the night sky, they immediately became excited. Without any hesitation, they immediately charged into the sky as quickly as they could, directly heading for the divine hall. At the same time, many supreme experts on the Tianyuan continent sensed it as well. They all emerged from seclusion and directly shot through space, heading in the direction of the City of God. I never thought that there would be a shrine hidden at the bottom of the Fragrance River. How unbelievable! Jianchen stared at the shrine in the sky in a daze as he mumbled to himself. Afterward, he carried Yu and charged into the shrine. Blackfish and Honglian followed, closely behind. Quan Yukai stared at the shrine in the sky and sighed. The world really is full of wonders. I never thought that a building could actually fly and fly so high. I've really learned something today. Yongling, let's go up and take a look. Quan Yukai and Yongling did not fall behind either. They followed behind Jianchen into the sky. There were quite a few Heaven Saint Masters on the 2 sides of the Fragrance River. As soon as Quan Yukai and Yongling left, many more Heaven Saint Masters controlled the energy of the world and flew into the sky. The multicolored light that flickered in the night sky was quite enchanting. Jianchen arrived at an altitude of 10,000 meters with Yu in his arms. He stared at the huge shrine in front of him. Above the entrance was a large plaque with the words Bright Moon Divine Hall written on it. The appearance of the Bright Moon Divine Hall caused quite a disturbance. People constantly flickered in the surroundings as saint rulers arrived at the entrance of the Bright Moon Divine Hall one after another. These people were all experts of the City of God. Other than the ancestors of the 8 great clans, there were also the saint rulers of the Radiant Saint Master Union and the saint rulers of the Tsar family. The saint rulers of the 8 clans were all pale and haggard. Clearly, the wounds they had suffered during the day had not completely healed. The Bright Moon Divine Hall. I never thought that this would actually be the Bright Moon Divine Hall. A cry rang out from nearby. An old man in simple robes stared at the Bright Moon Divine Hall with shining eyes. Beside the old man were all people of the Union, including the President and Grand Elder. Jianchen's eyes narrowed when he saw the old man. He could not help but think of the old man he had seen the first time wiping tables and chairs in the Radiant Saint Master Union's Tower of Radiance. Back then, the old man was still a mysterious expert that Jianchen could not see through. But now, Jianchen could clearly sense the old man's strength. He was at the 3rd heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor, and he had only broken through recently. The President of the Union let out a long sigh and said, according to the records, 50,000 years ago, Fairy Haiyue was a peerless beauty. Her talent was unprecedented, rarely seen in the world. In just 2,000 years, she reached the peak of the Holy Emperor. She was only a step away from surpassing the Holy Emperor. Unfortunately, Fairy Haiyue was unable to take that final step. She was stuck here for over 7,000 years. In the end, she was still unable to escape the punishment of death. She passed away with helplessness and regret. It's said that Fairy Haiyue's cultivation method is extremely wondrous. It can absorb the essence of moonlight. When you cultivate at night, You can clearly see the essence of moonlight being absorbed. It's a cultivation method that has already surpassed the saint tier. Anyone who cultivates it will make extremely rapid progress, said the Grand Elder of the Union. That's indeed what the records say. It's just a pity that Fairy Haoyue's cultivation method seems to only be suitable for women, said the president. Jianqin's eyes immediately lit up when he heard that. Joy filled his face. At this moment, the surrounding space began to pulse violently. Space gates appeared one after another in the surroundings, and the experts of the Holy Emperor stepped out of them with tremendous presences. They all looked at the bright moon divine hall and could not help but cry out. Jianqin glanced past the experts of the Holy Emperor. He saw people from the protector clans, including the Pure Heart Pavilion and the Chanyang Prefecture. However, although he had seen the Holy Emperor from the Chanyang Prefecture before, he did not know his name. Chapter 1041. More and more people gathered around the bright moon divine hall. Not only were there many Holy Emperor experts, there were even quite a few hermit saint rulers, as well as a few heaven saint masters and class 6 radiant saint masters who stood on milky white light. The City of God was one of the 7 capital cities of the Tianyuan continent. It was a place where experts gathered, and the fragrance river was outside the City of God. As a result, many experts were drawn over as soon as the bright moon divine hall broke free. There were even a few people from clans who used secret techniques to contact the experts of their clans and powerful friends, telling them everything that had happened. So this thing is called a divine hall, and it was created by a holy emperor. No wonder it's so wondrous that it can fly to such a high place. Quan Yukai and Yang Ling arrived behind Jianqin as well. They stared at the hazy divine hall in amazement. The material of this divine hall really is wondrous. It can actually absorb moonlight and convert it into its own energy. Blackfish stared at the divine hall and clicked his tongue in wonder. Jianqin's eyes narrowed when he heard that. After a while of careful observation, he discovered that the bright moon divine hall had indeed absorbed a sliver of moonlight. The sliver of moonlight was so faint that he would not have noticed it if he had not been paying close attention. Honglian began to recall the past as various memories appeared in her head. She said the bright moon divine hall was indeed created from some special materials on the moon. There are records of these materials in my inherited memories. Honglian paused slightly when she reached there. She raised her head to look at the moon in the sky and said, "That's because in ancient times a holy emperor of our divine phoenix clan flew to the moon from here. However, she spent much more time than Fairy Haoyue. She spent 4,000 years going back and forth." Jianqin immediately became stunned when he heard that. He subconsciously raised his head to look at the full moon and sighed. "I never thought that the Tianyuan continent would be so far away from the moon. Even with the Holy Emperor's strength, she still spent several thousand years to get there. It's just unbelievable. The moon is indeed a place where very few people set foot in. Even in ancient times, when the Holy Emperor was the most prosperous, there were very few people who were willing to waste so much time flying to the moon, because space gates cannot be formed in outer space. You can only take a slow flight to the moon," said Honglian. "The bright moon divine hall definitely has Fairy Haoyue's cultivation method. Although only women can practice it, if we take it back to the clan and give it to some talented female clansmen, their future accomplishments will be limitless," Jianqin thought to himself. The eyes of the supreme experts of the 10 protector clans and the holy emperor of other clans all lit up. They looked at the bright moon divine hall with undisguised greed, ignoring just how valuable the materials of the divine hall were. Just the cultivation method of Fairy Haoyue was enough to make the people of the protector clans drool. This was a cultivation technique that surpassed the saint rank. Even the 10 great guardian clans that had been passed down since ancient times did not possess such a high-level cultivation technique. At this moment, the people of the 10 protector clans began to move first. They either flew toward the divine hall alone or with a few saint ruler juniors. In the end, Only a middle-aged man from the Pure Heart pavilion remained. He was the only person present who was not tempted by the bright moon divine hall. The people of the 10 protector clans were like a fuse. As soon as they began to move, the holy emperor experts of the ancient clans and other large clans began to move as well. They quickly approached the divine hall. The saint rulers gathered in the surroundings all hovered where they were hesitantly before the holy emperor experts. How are they supposed to compete with them as mere saint rulers? Even if they came across treasures, they would not be able to compete with them. Their lives might even be in danger. However, not all of the saint rulers were afraid of death. After a moment of hesitation, some of them finally could not hold back their swelling desire and flew toward the divine hall without any regard for their lives. However, their actions deeply stimulated the others. Immediately, more and more saint rulers flew toward the divine hall as well. There were even a few Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters and Heaven Saint Masters who followed them in. Quan Yu Kai, Yan Ling, it's dangerous inside. You two stay outside and don't get involved. Jian Qin said to Quan Yu Kai and Yan Ling before flying toward the divine hall with Yu Yu in his arms. Blackfish and Hong Lian followed closely behind. Sigh, looks like a struggle is unavoidable. However, the new master of the divine hall seems to have been secretly decided. The saint ruler of the clear moon divine hall murmured. However, he glanced at Jianqin nearby. When he saw Blackfish standing behind Jianqin, a sliver of fear clearly appeared in his eyes. Afterward, he ripped open space and left. He did not plan on interfering with the matters of the divine hall. The ancestors of the 8 great clans of the city of God hovered in the air with pale faces. They stared deeply at the people who had flown into the bright moon divine hall as regret filled their faces. We're already heavily injured, so we can't participate in the battle for the divine hall. Let's return, a saint ruler of the clear moon divine hall said. A saint ruler from the 8 great clans said before leaving with a face full of regret. The other saint rulers of the 8 clans all sighed inside and returned to the city of gods in disappointment. Jianqin hugged Yu as they followed the crowd to the entrance of the bright moon divine hall. They hid in the sea of people in an inconspicuous manner. Bang, bang, bang. Several muffled sounds came from the front. The people of the 10 guardian clans at the very front had already forcefully opened the tightly shut door of the bright moon divine hall. The heavy stone door slowly opened with a series of muffled rumbles. Immediately, an icy cold stream of air gushed out from the divine hall. It was like a bone-chilling gust of wind, bringing with it a sense of desolation. Everyone present shuddered. It's moonlight force. A holy emperor from a guardian clan sighed in amazement. Moonlight force is different from saint force. It really is wondrous. No wonder Fairy Haya was able to become the greatest of the holy emperor back then. Aside from her personal strength, it probably has something to do with the unique moonlight force as well, someone discussed. Everyone began to walk on the floor created from the wondrous crystals on the moon as they slowly made their way into the divine hall. After passing through the entrance, the first thing that entered their eyes was an extremely spacious space. A huge stone tablet that was 100 meters tall stood in the center of the space. A row of simple words were clearly inscribed on it. The bright moon divine hall is forbidden to the holy emperor and the holy emperor, or face the consequences. All the holy emperor experts present revealed rather ugly expressions when they saw the words on the tablet. Although the warning on the tablet was filled with a sense of conceit and arrogance, even daring to look down on the holy emperor, none of the holy emperor experts present dared to disregard it. This was because the master of the divine hall was Fairy Haoyue, who had reached the apex of the holy emperor. She was only a step away from surpassing the holy emperor. On the other hand, the saint rulers and heaven saint masters were all overjoyed. They were extremely excited as they all thought that the heavens were watching over them. I never thought that Fairy Haoyue's divine hall would only allow people below the holy emperor to enter. Even the Holy Emperor and the Holy Emperor are forbidden from entering. I'm afraid that Fairy Haoyue has set up barriers and formations to deal with the Holy Emperor and the Holy Emperor, a Holy Emperor from an ancient clan said with a deep voice. His expression was very ugly. Humph, it's already been several tens of thousands of years since the era of Fairy Haoyue. Those barriers and formations definitely aren't as powerful as before. There's so many of us here, so what's there to be afraid of? A blue-robed old man called out loudly. Chapter 1042. That's right. If so many of us become cowards because of a single line of words on a stone tablet, we won't be able to set foot on the Tianyuan continent in the future. No matter what, I, Jiuenba, have to go and take a look at the Bright Moon Divine Hall today. I want to see just how powerful the Fairy Haoyue is to be able to kill our mighty Holy Emperor with a mere Divine Hall. A burly middle-aged man with a scar on his face said with a heavy voice. The expressions of all the Holy Emperor experts changed when they heard that. The fear in their eyes vanished, replaced by determination. It was not that they were brainless. Every single expert who could reach the level of Holy Emperor had gone through trials of life and death. They had climbed over countless corpses, so how could they be afraid of death? At the same time, the Holy Emperor was a supreme expert who stood at the apex of the Tianyuan continent, so he obviously had his dignity. How could someone as prideful as them be scared away by a single line of words on a stone tablet? Looks like it's quite lively here. At this moment, a clear laugh rang out from behind. Another Holy Emperor entered the Divine Hall in an imposing manner. This was a very handsome young man who was about 30 years old. Young man, ah! This man displayed a gentle and refined temperament. His every movement carried a noble temperament. Beside him was a devastatingly beautiful woman in a long white dress. Kara Livy. Jianqin was slightly surprised when he saw the woman. He had never thought that Kara Livy would actually return and come to the Divine Hall. Afterward, Jianqin glanced at the middle-aged man beside Kara Livy, and his eyes immediately narrowed. He recognized the middle-aged man. He was the ancestor of the Kara clan whom he had met once in the imperial palace of the Qin Empire. Kara Lo, I had thought you weren't coming. I never thought you'd bring the beloved daughter of your Kara clan. A deep voice boomed. A deep voice came from the crowd. It was a middle-aged man with an ordinary appearance. He wore a tight suit and spoke to the old ancestor of the Kara family. Kara Lo chuckled aloud. The emergence of a Divine Hall is an incredible matter on the Tianyuan continent. It's enough to make all the Holy Emperor fight for it. If we're lucky enough, we can take the Divine Hall for ourselves, and it'll bring endless benefits to the clan. Ka Jianxiong, how can I miss such a great opportunity? The middle-aged man was the ancestor of one of the 3 great clans of the Holy Emperor's empire, the Kara clan. Kara Lo looked at Jianqin again and smiled faintly. I never thought that Brother Jianqin would be here as well. That's fantastic. If you don't mind, I'm willing to travel with you and take Li Wei with me to broaden her horizons. I wonder what you think about this, Brother Jianqin? Kara Livy also discovered Jianqin in the crowd. She could not help but think of the scene from the boat, and she could not help but blush slightly. After leaving the pleasure boat, she had left the city of God with the ancestor of the Kara family, Kalilo. However, she did not expect the Bright Moon Divine Hall to break out of the water as soon as they returned to the family. The huge commotion it emitted alarmed Kalilo, who then forcefully brought her over. The Kara clan was a vassal clan of the Qin Empire, while Jianqin was the imperial protector of the Qin Empire. As a result, he was on the same side as the Kara clan. Jianqin had no reason to turn down Kara Lo's request, so he agreed without hesitation. Afterward, he began to chat with Kara Lo. Kara Livy returned to normal as well. She arrived beside Jianqin with a smile and grabbed Yu's hand as she began to chat with him. The two of them got along very well, giggling from time to time. Xiangtian, I never thought you'd be here as well. That's fantastic. It just so happens that we can walk together. I'll introduce some matters of the clan to you so you can understand them better. The great elder from the Changyang prefecture also arrived beside Jianqin. Although he seemed amiable, he emphasized the words grandfather. Jianqin did not show much enthusiasm towards this grandfather. He did not even know the name of. He only replied indifferently before shifting his attention elsewhere. Jianqin did not have a particularly good impression of anyone in the Changyang prefecture aside from Changyang Zhu Yunxiao and his wife. He had even never admitted that he was a member of a protector clan deep down. The great elder from the Changyang prefecture frowned slightly when he saw how indifferent Jianqin was to him. He became slightly displeased, but he did not say anything more. The people gathered in the bright moon divine hall gradually began to make their way into the depths of the divine hall. However, the warning on the stone tablet seemed to have been spread by a few people. The saint rulers and heaven saint masters, who originally did not plan on participating, all surged into the divine hall, causing the number of people in the divine hall to rapidly increase. At the same time, the news of the divine hall and the warning on the stone tablet rapidly spread across the Tianyuan continent, causing many experts to become envious. Even more saint rulers and heaven saint masters who could fly began to make their way to the city of God through various methods. A large group of people made their way into the depths of the bright moon divine hall. A large number of heaven saint masters and saint rulers would enter every hall they passed by. The group gradually began to disperse. A few heaven saint masters and saint rulers had already gone off in search of their own fortuitous encounters. Only the experts who had reached the level of Holy Emperor remained together. They carefully and cautiously made their way into the depths at a steady pace, ignoring the halls around them. Brother Jianqin, the most precious things here are the bright moon divine hall and Fairy Haoyu's cultivation method from the past. However, these precious things can only be obtained from the depths of the divine hall. It's impossible for them to be placed outside, Jianqin explained. The ancestor of the Kara clan explained to Jianqin as he walked. He passed on all the knowledge and experience he had accumulated over several thousand years to Jianqin. The ancestor of the Kara clan, Kazi Jianxiong, added a few words from time to time. His intention to befriend Jianqin was obvious. Everyone quickly arrived at a huge square that was 100 meters tall. In the center of the square, a huge stone statue stood there. The stone statue was of a woman who looked to be in her 20s. She was dressed in white and had long hair that draped over her shoulders. Her appearance was extremely beautiful, like a fairy from the 9 heavens. She did not belong to the mortal world at all. This statue must be Fairy Haoyue without a doubt. Fairy Haoyue really is worthy of being called a fairy. She really does seem like an otherworldly fairy. Fairy Haoyue's talent is unprecedented. She reached the peak of the Holy Emperor realm at such a young age, becoming the greatest of the Holy Emperor realm. It's just a pity that she was unable to break through that barrier in the end and passed away. What a pity! What a pity! The many Holy Emperor realm experts all stared at the statue with mixed feelings as they discussed. Various sighs and sighs of regret mixed together, forming a buzzing sound. Fairy Haoyu really is a fairy of unmatched beauty, Jianqin said. Jianqin also stared at the divine hall in a daze as he murmured to himself. Fairy Haoyue's beauty had completely exceeded the level of alluring beauty. Out of all the women he had seen before, only the Zither Saint and the Heavenly Enchantress could compare to her. At this moment, something happened. An extremely heavy killing intent suddenly appeared, permeating the entire divine hall. The killing intent was bone-chilling. As soon as it appeared, it had already invaded the bodies of all the Holy Emperor realm experts present, drilling into their bones as if it wanted to freeze their bones. Even Jianqin was unable to avoid it. Chapter 1043. Terrifying energy erupted in the plaza of the Bright Moon Divine Hall. The terrifying energy from all the Holy Emperor's experts interweaved together, immediately forming an extremely powerful shockwave that expanded in all directions. It knocked all the saint rulers, and those below, saint ruler far away. The heaven saint masters and class 6 Radiant Saint Masters in particular all spat out blood as they were blown away. They were already heavily injured, while the weaker Class 6 Radiant Saint Masters were even more heavily injured. Jianchen, Blackfish, Honglian, Kalalo, Kaza Jianxiong, and the Great Elder from the Chanyang Prefecture gathered together. They all knew about the relationship between Yu Yu and Jianchen, so they worked together to create a barrier of energy around Yu Yu and Karalibi, preventing them from being injured at all. This should be something Fairy Haoyue left behind to deal with the Holy Emperor. Let's get them away from us first, so we don't have to worry about them. Otherwise, if we encounter true danger, it'll be very difficult for us to take care of them, the Great Elder from the Chanyang Prefecture said with a heavy voice. Brother Jianchen, what do you think? Kalalo looked at Jianchen. That's fine too. Jianchen hesitated slightly before directly striking the barrier of energy around Yu Yu and Karalibi, knocking them far away. The killing intent here is rapidly increasing. If this continues, even the Holy Emperor will struggle to stop it at great perfection. There's something strange about this murderous aura. It's not just pure murderous aura. It seems to be mixed with something else. Once this murderous aura enters the body, it will destroy our bodies like maggots in the bones. Let's move faster and pass through this region. Everyone called out. Afterward, they all radiated with Saint Force to resist the killing intent as they made their way into the depths of the Divine Hall. However, the deeper they went, the heavier the killing intent became. A few people at the first heavenly layer of the Holy Emperor began to show signs of being unable to stop it. Jianchen did not release energy from his body like the others and create a barrier around him to block the killing intent. Instead, he expanded his chaotic force to his entire body, completely using the advantage of the chaotic body. It became even easier to block the killing intent. The strange killing intent in the Divine Hall was unable to penetrate his body at all. Jianchen glanced past everyone as doubt filled his face. Even the Holy Emperor would struggle to resist the killing intent, let alone the Saint Rulers. If Saint Rulers set foot in this region, they would not be able to last for long before the killing intent would invade their bodies and kill them. They would not be able to pass through at all. He had no idea why Fairy Haoyue had left such a warning on the stone tablet. Does Fairy Haoyue not want the Divine Hall she has worked so hard on to fall into the hands of others, which is why she has cast down killing formations in the Divine Hall to stop the Holy Emperor and the Holy Emperor from entering? The people below the Holy Emperor can't enter the Divine Hall safely, but they're just far too weak, unable to catch Fairy Haoyue's attention, which is why she didn't mention it in detail on the stone tablet. Jianchen analyzed inside. He had already begun to suspect that everyone had misunderstood the stone tablet. Otherwise, if the people below the Holy Emperor were not restricted by the killing intent of the Holy Emperor, why would he be attacked by such powerful killing intent? After all, he was still a 7th heavenly layer Saint Ruler. His battle prowess had only reached the level of the Holy Emperor. At this moment, a barrier silently appeared. It was extremely large and was no longer white. Instead, it was the color of moonlight condensed from moonlight force. It filled the entire Divine Hall, enveloping Jianchen's group, including the Saint Rulers and Heaven Saint Masters behind them. Afterward, moonlight force suddenly surged within the barrier. It condensed into dense strands of sword qi in the air before raining down like rain. They shot toward everyone in the hall with unbelievable speed, including the Saint Rulers, Heaven Saint Masters, and Class 6, Radiant Saint Masters. Yu Yu, Karalivi, and all the other Heaven Saint Masters and Saint Rulers revealed different expressions when they saw this. Despair filled many of their eyes. This was an ability cast down by a Holy Emperor, so its power was obvious. It was not something they could block. Oh no! Jianchen's face changed drastically. He used the illusory flash and charged toward Yu as quickly as he could. At the same time, the saint artifact shot out from between his eyebrows, turning into a huge golden tower in the blink of an eye. It shot toward Yu as a golden streak of light. He wanted to get close to Yu and suck her into the artifact space. The saint artifact needed a certain distance to suck someone into the artifact space, but the sword chi condensed from moonlight force was just too fast. It far surpassed the speed of Genshin and the saint artifact. Before Genshin and the saint artifact could even approach you, countless strands of moonlight sword chi struck you. You are! Genshin cried out as his eyes became bloodshot. He was filled with regret. If he had known earlier, he would have sucked you into the artifact space. At the same time, Genshin's body shook violently. He had been struck by over a dozen strands of moonlight sword chi at the same time. However, they were only as powerful as the Holy Emperor's first heavenly layer, so they were unable to break through the defenses of Genshin's chaotic body. As soon as they collided with Genshin, they shattered like eggs against a rock. They turned back into moonlight force and drifted through the barrier. They did not disperse. Genshin arrived beside Yu as well, just when he wanted to control the saint artifact to suck Yu into the artifact space. He suddenly became stunned. He stared at Yu in a daze as disbelief filled his eyes. Yu's beautiful eyes were filled with panic as she stood there. However, she was completely unscathed. She didn't suffer any injuries at all. You're not injured? Genshin asked in surprise. He had personally experienced the power of the moonlight sword chi. Each strand of moonlight sword chi possessed the power of the Holy Emperor's first heavenly layer. Attacks like that were extremely fatal to someone of Yu's strength. Cara Livy also stood there in a fright. She could not help but giggle when she saw how Genshin actually cared about Yu so much. She patted her chest and said, Yang Yutian, I never thought you would care about your fiancé so much. Don't worry, we're fine. Yu's heart immediately warmed up when she saw Genshin's expression. She smiled sweetly and said, Genshin, don't worry. I'm fine. The sword chi from before didn't seem to harm us. Have you forgotten the warning on the tablet? As long as it's someone below the Holy Emperor, they won't be attacked. Genshin glanced around and discovered that all the people below the Holy Emperor were standing there unscathed. Aside from a few people who had been injured by the bursts of energy from the Holy Emperor earlier, no one else was injured. Genshin immediately understood when he saw this. The warning on the tablet was true. The formations of the Divine Hall would not attack anyone below the Holy Emperor. However, he was not a saint ruler, but his strength was on par with the Holy Emperor's, which was why he was listed as a Holy Emperor. Genshin, be careful. The sword chi is condensing again, Yu warned. Genshin ignored the sword chi condensing in the air. He turned into a 30-meter tall saint artifact and hovered above his head. Afterward, he said to Yu and Cara Livy, Do you two want to hide in the artifact space? Genshin, we won't be harmed here anyway. So why don't you just let us stay outside? I've never seen something so grand before. Yu tactfully declined Genshin's suggestion. Genshin hesitated slightly before agreeing to Yu's suggestion in the end. He did not force Yu into the artifact space, but he did hand the artifact to Yu. He had already secretly told the artifact spirit that it would immediately send Yu and Cara Livy into the artifact space as soon as there was any danger. The sword chi condensed from moonlight force once again and shot toward everyone. All the Holy Emperor experts used their various abilities to block the sword chi. Genshin could block attacks from the Holy Emperor at the third heavenly layer due to his chaotic body. Unless the attacks were as powerful as the Holy Emperor at the fourth heavenly layer, they would not be able to break through his chaotic body at all. This was because he could block the attacks the easiest out of everyone. However, Genshin could clearly sense that the attacks this time were much more powerful than before when he was struck by the dense cluster of moonlight sword chi. Arg! Suddenly, a miserable cry rang out. A holy emperor at the first heavenly layer had been struck by the moonlight sword chi, causing him to wail out in pain. Afterwards, a tremendous amount of energy began to drift out of his body, dispersing into the divine hall in the end. Oh no! This damned moonlight force is devouring my power, the person cried out in fear as he became flustered.